and at the beginning of it all, they are calling a prince, until our protagonist realizes that the prince, it's him, so when he looks at himself and those people around him wearing clothes he never saw, he wonders where he is, and remembers that he was in a hurry because he has to finish the plans, because the next day was the day he had to have them ready. But then a gentleman will speak to him, calling him Your Highness, and he says that it is already almost time for the execution, telling him to hurry up and announce the decree, but he doesn't understand anything that old man is saying. But soon he has a shock that makes him remembering everything that is going on, and he already knows that his self is now the fourth prince of the Grey Castle, Roland Wimbledon. Then he says that the decree fight for the throne was the bizarre idea his father came up with to decide who will succeed to the throne, and he placed several territories under the command of his 5 adult sons, and based on their performance of governing for 5 years, he would decide who would become the successor. Then his father says that for 5 years he wants to personally witness the capabilities of rule the lands given to him, and he says that the fight for the inheritance of the throne, it will be a fair competition. But then Roland is left wondering if he thinks they are playing real-time strategy game, wondering who would ensure that the conditions, everyone's initials will be the same, and it talks about physical strength, the exaggerated attribute of the first prince. Then he also speaks of wealth, the main attribute of the second prince, and military strength, which would be the main attribute of the third princess, and then intelligence, which is the main attribute of the fifth princess, and he is the one who spends his time drinking and practicing indulgence in pleasure, a hedonist. So he says that this is the fourth prince who has not been favored since he was little and still loves to play with death, and he was assigned to that border town where even a bird wouldn't want to shit, and he says he's living with a bunch of aborigines in that town where excrement is thrown anywhere, which leaves them on the verge of a black plague, and says that everything is really okay. So he is disappointed, and that man next to him tell him that the execution is about to begin, telling him to hurry up and announce it, the decree, and he remembers that that version of it was there for the reason he is planning execute a witch. And while the girl is already on the gallows, everyone continues to curse her, calling her a cursed witch, saying that she is the incarnation of the devil, and he says that because she has done so many bad things, they must force her to death. And in that, the prince is surprised and says that in a place where civilization has no mind open, something like that would really be happening, and in that he says that they are putting all the pain and guilt, all in just one miserable person, and in that he commands that person to be set free. Witch and the man who was next to her is surprised by his decision, as well as almost all the residents there, and he realizes that any excuse he's going to give won't work. To work, and say that you are tired, and they will make the decree another day. But then, that gentleman starts asking him to go back, and the chief knight Carter appears, telling him that this is no joke, and says that once the witch's identity is confirmed, they must be killed, and he says they must do this because it can attract other witches to free her. But then the prince wonders and becomes curious that a knight who has an arm thicker than a person's body is afraid of a prison break-in. But then the prince asks if it wouldn't be nice if some other witches came and they captured them all at once, and he says he's going to rest, and they are all dismissed. And at that, Carter is surprised by the boy's decision, and already in the border town, in the southern castle, where the prince's temporary residence is located, he locks himself in the room, and is surprised by his situation, wondering what happened. He did, because the last time he spoke to so many people was actually on New Year's Chinese. He wonders if maybe he died from overworking and has reincarnated in that place there, but he realizes that complaining won't do any good, and let it go, saying that this is still another life. In any case, he can't complain, and says that from that point on he is Roland, and will start getting information about that witch. So he goes straight to prison, and Carter says that what he is doing it is very dangerous, and says that even if she is chained by the amulet of divine retribution, this does not guarantee that the prince will be safe. And he asks to the chief knight if he is really afraid of a young lady, saying that this is too ridiculous. But Carter says they are the devil's claws, and the prince wonders why this guy has to be so talkative. And when he gets to the cell, he looks at the girl, and then she stands up and starts looking into his eyes, and he asks for her to come closer, but Carter steps in front of her and tells her not to do it. So the prince asks him not to be nervous, and he asks what the witch's name is, but Carter returns to torment, saying that she is a witch who used witchcraft to kill people in the mine on the northern slope, and he is a monster that cannot even be burned to death. And he tells the prince that he should not speak to her, because she will surely bewitch you, but he simply gives your soldier a beating that doesn't stop to talk. So he asks what happened at the northern mine, questioning if she can tell her in detail, but she gets a little discouraged, and he questions what it was, asking if she doesn't want to talk about it, but she says that she actually will talk about it, and she says that his father works in the mine, but because of the collapse that happened he got trapped, so she says that at that time the miner wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to steal what he had, anything valuable. Then a man came calling him a damn thief, and fighting against the man, but he ended up being defeated, and the girl calls that man Uncle Ansgar. As she screams for him, the man who knocked him down says he won't let anyone ruin him. Their plans, wanting to kill the man, and the girl becomes desperate seeing that scene, until her magical powers begin to surface, and when she turns around, she can only see a body in front of you completely charred. So if the uncle asks if she was the one who did it, and his wife says that it is the power of a witch, and they start to get scared of the girl saves her life, but the only thing that matters is whether she is a witch or not, and after they come out of there, while she carries her father, she asks them not to tell no one that she is a witch, but things didn't go as they should have and she ended up in prison, and the prince realizes that she is only there because her neighbor turned her in, and she says that he didn't give it to her, the person who gave it to her was her own father. So the old man starts to say that as he can see, she has already confessed and he must execute her fast, but he says that on the contrary, he wants to take a look at the famous power of witches, and then the girl starts asking if he wants to see the power of the brothers that everyone talks about, and he says yes, and she says that they put the medallion of retribution divine on her neck, so she can't release the witch's power, and she questions if he dares to take the medallion of divine retribution from her, and that is if he is not with afraid that his curiosity might end up killing him, but then he pulls her by the collar, and ends up breaking it, and asks her to show him, telling her to start her performance. Then the girl begins to activate her fire magic, and he is amazed at what see, and the fire takes over that entire saddle surrounding the girl, and in that Carter asks the prince, "Be careful," and he wonders if that is the power of a witch. While he is amazed, the saddle bars begin to melt, and Carter tells the girl not to come closer near him, calling her a cursed witch, and the prince thinks it's no wonder that Barov said that fire cannot kill her, after all she is fire itself, so how she would be afraid of herself. So the girl simply puts out the fire, and the prince is amazed that magic actually exists in that world, and begins to imagine how many resources she could do. So the girl says that she satisfied his curiosity, and says that he can now kill her, but the prince takes off his clothes and throws them over her, saying that he decided to hire him. Then he begins to explain the second law of thermodynamics. Heat can never pass from a colder body to a hotter body without interference of the environment, and it is impossible to convert heat from a single source into work without causing other effects, and the change from one state in equilibrium to another, being spontaneous or irreversible, will always increase entropy. Then he begins to explain in detail, and thinks that this world has ended the entropy problem, and she can create magic out of nothing, and this is much more impressive than the much theorized invention of the perpetual engine. Then Barovio starts asking what the boy said, questioning if he is sure who really wants to hire a witch, because she could make him suffer a calamity as easily as snapping a finger, and he asks if there's a problem with that, and Barovio says that his attitude is basically announcing publicly that he is going against the church, and they will be watched by the corporate association of witches, and they will kill him in one go, and he simply asks Barovio to bring him a copy of the employment contract immediately, but Barovio ends up showing doubt, and he asks if he, as his deputy minister, doesn't know what that would be, and he says that wants to formally establish a working relationship with Anna, and in addition he also asks someone to find a house for the girl, and sometime later, already in the castle, he asks to Barovio if he has already prepared everything he instructed to do, and he says that according to with his instructions, the witch was already killed on the gallows in a public square during the afternoon. But then Barovio says that he actually saved a witch, and the risk is very high, and he thinks the prince is causing a lot of trouble, but Roland tells him to. He does not doubt his decisions, and says that from his point of view, witches are not demons, ghosts, or monsters, so Barovio tries to counter, but the prince is serious with him, asking if he thinks the border town is a good place, and he says he really doesn't. It's a good place, and the prince says it's really a terrible place, and he says that without the fortune of the second brother, and the military strength of the third sister, what would be the chance that they have to win against them, and Barovio is static listening to this, and the prince says, which is practically zero, so he can only resort to one method, and in this Barovio is enchanted by his words, and he says that's right, asking where he is Anna, telling him to bring her for him to meet, and in the meantime the girl will get a bath. And one of the maids says that the prince wants her to wear that as her uniform. Work, and she wonders if she really has to wear that kind of thing. And right after putting on that thing, it is said that Prince Roland wants to see her, and while. So he will look at the house that was built for the girl, and he thinks that even though it is built in a hurry, so Anna would have somewhere to practice, that cabin looks pretty decent. The cartel announces to the prince that Anna has arrived, and then he sees her in that little outfit of the maid he gave to the girl, and he keeps thinking that the clothing decision was indeed correct, as workers' robes are very stiff and wizards' robes are very embarrassed, especially that maid outfit that was altered is the most suitable for witches. And he asks Anna what she thought, if those clothes fit to her, but she completely changes the subject, asking him why he welcomed her, someone like her, and she says she's a witch, and has evil, corrupt blood running through her, of her body, and asks if he isn't afraid, and in that she remembers everything that happened until then and the prejudice he suffered from people, and the prince says he is not afraid, and he says that thinking that the power of witches comes from demons is nothing more than human prejudice, and he says that the reason people fear her is because, besides them not understanding him, he simply cannot undertake that kind of power, and he says he doesn't believe this power is demonic, and he doesn't believe in anything more than that power belongs to her, and only to her, and he says that he will help she helping to control that power. And sometime later in the testing room she looks quite tired, and the prince asks if she can still continue, and at that the girl invokes his magic easily, and he says that practicing fire control is not so easy as she imagined, and as the girl continues testing her clothes begin to burn, and the prince thinks that fortunately he left Tyr prepared a handful of spare clothes, and they will finally be able to be used well, and he says that the insistence of Annie not wearing the maid outfit while practicing seems to have been a somewhat how wise, otherwise the maid's outfits would all have been burned, and that's when the news that Barov has something to report to him quickly, and so he begins to look for by his highness, and he says that the patrol squad reported that they found traces of demonic beasts, and it says that the demon months have come early this year. But the prince wonders what he is talking about, and at that Barov says that the prince must not be enlightened about this, but every year after the first snow has fallen the sun becomes weak and dark, and the gates of hell within the mountain would open in the meantime, and he says that the border city just doesn't have any capacity to protect themselves, therefore all inhabitants will have to migrate to the Song Forge. However, he asks the prince to remain calm, but his safety will definitely be his priority, so he asks Barov if he has ever seen the gates of the hell, and he asks how normal people could see him, because leaving aside the fact that the mountain is completely impossible to cross, the pain of getting close from her the person would be affected by the evil miasma, but he says that there is a method, and the prince is curious about this, and he says that the person would not be affected if they were a witch who have fallen from grace and have become the clutches of the devil, and only witches are not affected by the miasma and are consequently able to see the gates of hell. Then the prince asks about demonic beasts, asking if he swears he has seen one of these before, and he says he's never seen a demonic beast before, and he says that just like the prince, it is also his first time in the frontier city, and in the center of the kingdom of Grey Castle only some people encountered a real demonic beast, and in this the prince speaks that to have to buy every year, how would this place be able to develop? And he says that at first he thought that even if the border city is just a wasteland, at least it should still have potential to develop, but apparently this place is nothing more than a hopeless hole, and he says that since the strong songbook is able to defend itself against demonic beasts, this means that they are not invincible, so he asks why they can't defeat them in the frontier city, and Barov says that the Song Fort has a great wall, and the elite troops of the Doc and Ryan are standing there, and he questions how a frontier village is in a place so small could be compared to them, and then Roland realizes that the reason for border village having been built between the northern slope and the Shersway River was to be used as cannon fodder, and he orders Barov to bring his people and find the guards and local hunters, and he says they must have lived there for more than 5 years, and they are the best choice to face the demonic beasts, and after that he will simply eat with Anna and ask her to tell him about the months of the devil, and she says that everything is fine. Well, speaking of which, unlike them, the nobles, for them the months of the devil are a nightmare that they have to go through every year, a nightmare that someone could even die from, and as a prince, wise her father is a miner, and like most people in that village, he lived a hard life, and she says that every year when the demon months came, they would transport the year's Khalida from the border town to the Song Fort to exchange for food, for the next year and some gold coins, and she says that during the months of the devil, they would be temporarily settled in the Song Fort until winter was over, and she says that there was a year when this period lasted for 4 months, and the government official from the fort told them that the mineral production that winter was only enough to 3 months of food, and they would only give food for the 4th month when the next shipment of ore arrived, but because the demon months were not over yet, they were still not able to leave the strong songbook, and not only that, but because the food and all other necessities were all distributed, the strong abusing the weak. It was a daily occurrence, and she says that some people were unable to cope during the months of the devil, and ended up dying, so he says that he recognizes that this must have been hard for a girl like her, as well as for her father, and she says that in fact during that time her father was still very protective of her, but then the mood changes completely, and she says that these were 25 gold coins, and her father just wanted continue living, and the prince bangs his fist on the table, saying that these kinds of months of the demon will never come again, and he questions where Barov is sending the call, saying that he wants to ask how he handled the matters he asked, and then, already in the government office he will speak to Barov, asking if those are the people he is looking for, and one of them is the gray dog and the other is Brian, and he says that those two are from the Fronteriza City Patrol Squad, and they are in charge of lighting the lighthouse every year, and that other hunter said that he has fought demonic beasts before and personally cut off the head of one of them. Beasts, and the gray dog begins to talk to the prince that when the snow began falling into the lighthouse tower, they were able to spot the movement of the demonic beasts, and they passed through the hidden forest, then they lit the beacon fire to the tower, asking where the people of the city were to leave. Then the prince speaks that since they both came together he should let his partner answer, asking what demonic beasts look like, and also questioning whether they can be killed, and he says that they can be killed, and originally they were common forest animals, and even that they have been affected by the evil miasma and become ferocious maniacs, they still can be killed, and he says that every year after the demon months are over the fort songbook would send out the cavalry troops to finish off the remaining beasts that would be on the way between the fort and the border village, but then that hunter who was there starts talking, saying that they are nothing special, and tells the prince who killed demonic beasts before, 2 of them, so everyone is surprised with that, and right after saying that, he leaves looking in front of the prince, and he realizes that that time really matches the man who said he killed 2 demonic beasts before. Then Barov says that this is the city hunter, and his name is Iron Axe, and because he is so tall, it is rumored that he has the bloodline of the giant Majin clan, and the prince asks about what he said about having killed demonic beasts, and he says, who killed a kind of wild boar and a kind of wolf, and the prince questions what he means when he talks about species, and he says that species is the way that hunters classify them, and they were originally common forest animals, but because from the infernal evil Mayadima, they became mad, ferocious, and very difficult to deal with. Then he remembers saying that the wolf species improves his dexterity. Besides that, their speed is impressive, and if you want to kill them, you will have to prepare a trap of the giant, and for the wild boar species, its black chorus becomes extremely hard, even at a distance of 50 yards, and it would still be very difficult for the beast to penetrate, and the prince realizes that the strong becomes stronger, and the swift becomes swifter still. However, they are still all animals, and the Iron Axe says that is exactly what it is, saying that they are not the scariest enemies. He says that the scariest ones are the hybrids, and he says that they are the incarnation of the devil, and only hell would be capable of creating such beasts. That he says he has only seen one hybrid species before, and not only does it have the strong body of one ferocious beast, but it still had a pair of wings on its back and was able to fly for a short distance, and furthermore, seems to be able to know where he is no matter where he is hid, because he always found it, and he only managed to survive by jumping into the river shortly before fainting, and in that the prince thinks that that world is increasingly like a fantasy. A strong wall can stop common beasts, but what about those that can fly? In this the prince says that hybrids must be rare, and Carter says that there aren't many of them, and at each period of the demon months there should be only 2 or 3 hybrids, if not the strong songbook would have faced great problems every year, so the prince thinks that's it, and says he has decided stay in the border village, but then Carter is saying that this matter is definitely out of the question, and he says that against wild boar species alone, only the troops of elite of the strong songbook are able to deal with them, and counting their large numbers, without a wall as support depending only on guards to defend against the demonic beasts after casualties exceed 10%, everything would certainly fall apart, and then the prince remains calm speaking that if it is so, what if he gives you a wall, and he says he will build a wall right between the beginning of the mountain slope and the Red River. But Carter says that even though he likes to play, there must be a limit, and he wonders if the prince knows how long it would take to build a wall like that, not to mention they only have 4 months, until the demon months, and he says that even if they had 4 years, it might not be enough to build the wall. Then he says he understands this, and says that Carter should not make hasty conclusions, and if there isn't a decent wall when the time comes, they'll just follow and retreat to the strong songbook. After all, he doesn't intend to waste his life in that cursed place, and so Carter says he swears to protect him with his life, and already in the gray castle in the clear water harbor, Garcia says that the sea breeze has turned cold, and winter is coming, and she asks Ryan if his black sail fleet will be able to return. Then he says that if nothing unexpected happened, she will be able to reach the port of Agua Clara in 3 days, which she says is the last trip of the year, and hopes he spoils a very satisfying surprise, and says that if she saves gold pieces in the cabinet, they will be just stones, and only by spending the gold pieces, they will be able to display their true worth. So she tells them to go back to room, as the wind is getting stronger and stronger, and already in the palace, he speaks to her, saying that there is something she doesn't understand, questioning how she managed to predict everything, even before the king announces the fight for the throne, and she questions what he means by predicting, because she didn't know that her father would think about a fight for the throne, and she says that this is an idea disgusting to help pave the way for that darling second son of his, and she questions whether the person who best governs in your city would definitely be fit to sit on the throne of the Grey Castle, and says that he thought he would be able to understand after he saw the plan of the Black Fleets. He thinks that is the reason, because his fleet was not only built to amassing wealth, allowing withdrawals, and not adding taxes, and he says that since the plan of the Black Sail Fleet has already gained experienced sailors, fierce warriors, and the support of the people, and he says that this is the 3rd princess of the Grey Castle, Garciel Imlanden, a woman who is able to count on her clarity and strength to ignite the throne, and at that she changes the subject, saying that she heard that those little tricks failed, and he says yes, saying that he only has news in the border town, reporting that the pill failed. As for the other places, they don't even have news. So she says that if they don't have news from other places, it means they went with her brothers, as expected. However, she did not expect that even her 4th brother would make it out alive, and to tell the truth, she feels a little disappointed, and Ryan says that the Fisherman King said in a letter that she saw the 4th prince eat the pill with her own eyes, and Garciel says that he fails, and she doesn't want to hear any explanation. And as soon as the demon months begin, your lovely 4th brother will go to Songfort to take refuge, and she says that when the demonic beasts attack, the fort will definitely be in confusion for a while, and he must write the letter to the fisherwoman telling her to grab the pill, and she also asks if the pill was purchased from the alchemy master, Envious, and questions what he said that time, saying that the pill is colorless, tasteless, and melts immediately in contact with water, and definitive death if the pill is taken, being incurable, and it is the newest feat of his alchemy. And Ryan says yes, that's what he said, and so Garciel orders him to be hanged. And in the past, while Anna is in a pasture, a man comes asking what she is reading again, asking if they are poems by the new ones, or is it the story of religious development, and she greets her teacher. Everything falls apart, and he wakes up with her being hanged, and he becomes desperate, but then he goes back to reality, thinking that he dreamed again about Anna's execution, and thinks that if they piss a pure girl like Anna may be proclaimed as evil, those administrative officers of the Grey Castle, whose greed cannot be undone, should be the demons of hell, and he says that if it weren't for them replacing stone materials to end up with a few hundred pieces of extra gold from their pockets, would not have caused the collapse of the new theater while it was in construction and took with it the lives of more than 30 people, and in this he says that they are the ones who should to be hanged, but that Rhino did not give them the trial they deserved. Instead it was the innocent Masons Guild that took the blame, imposing high taxes, distributing resources unequally and in disorder in public safety, and thus crowning with the title of Devil a confused and innocent little girl, ending up cruelly taking her to the gallows, and in that he asks God what is really evil and if he is able to see clearly, and then someone knocks on the door, and a little girl goes to talk to the teacher saying that she feels there is something wrong with her body, and asks him if she's going to be hanged like Anna, and he says no and she'll be fine, because his teacher will protect him, and during the day he walks down the street thinking that he doesn't imposed itself when the Masons Guild was destroyed, and also did nothing when the Anna was hanged, and he can't let the same thing happen to Nana, and thinks he should do something, but in doing so he hears someone asking not to be squeezed, and when he checks what it is all that confusion, he notices a job note, which has the symbol of royalty, and remembers his highness, and it is said that his way of thinking is unique, and his personality is different from common people, and he justly dislikes the church extremely. However, it is more likely that he be treated as an accomplice of the witches and sent to the gallows, but he thinks that now he can only put your hope in that prince who does not like the church, who will be able to treat the laws from the church with toilet paper paper, and says that for Anna who has already died, hope for those who for Nana that is still alive, and also by the hope that the remains in your heart will stop growing. And a while later, Carter asks the prince, with a loud and wide voice, does he intend to build that wall, and he says at least 15 feet high and 6 feet wide, big enough for 4 people to walk together side by side, and Carter says that if it goes that way, they will have to dig a trench as deep as a person's height to stabilize the top of the wall, and furthermore, the upper part is in the measurements he said, the width of the lower part of the wall will have to be double, and he says that even if the digging of the trench and the construction of the wall start at the same time, and if he gives you 350 craftsmen, the maximum he can guarantee is that it is capable to conclude in the demon months of next year. Then Roland asks what the main problem is, and Carter says that the main problem is that to ensure the stability of the wall, each stone must be chosen and cut appropriately, otherwise it will be very difficult, so that they can stay together, and the prince says he understands this, saying that he will follow his plan. The digging of the trench and the construction of the wall will be carried out at the same time, and he says that against the construction of the wall, he doesn't need to worry about it, because the last product of the alchemy workshops of the Grey Castle, the cement, will leave him surprised. And already in the cement burning room, Carter asks him if the cement is in that room can actually be done, and Roland thinks that cement production is quite simple, and the raw materials are quite common. After all, just searching the surroundings of the border village, he will be able to get everything he needs, and the crucial point in making cement is the temperature of him. However, he does not remember the specific temperature required, and at the time there are also no reliable tools to control and configure the temperature of that way, and so Anna leaves the cabin and the prince asks Carter to wait there. So he says that in that way the production of cement can only depend on the power of the witch, and so she looks at him and asks if it worked, and she says that she didn't disappoint him, and when they get in there, she asks if this is what he wanted, and he says it looks like it, but if it will work or not he will only know after testing it, and she asks what it is for, and he says it is to build houses, bridges and roads. There are many places where it can be used, and if that is successful in the future, people will no longer need to fear the cold wind or the rain and snow strong destroy their houses, and he says that such incredible building material is only possible because of her, and so they go out and Roland gives a demonstration of what cement is capable of, and Carter asks if this is a cement effect, because it looks like he glued 2 bricks together, and he says, which looks very good, and is very firm, totally different from hardened clay, and so Carter tries to release the bricks, but ends up failing miserably, and Roland tells him to stop, tells him not be so bothered, because he already understood more or less the hardness of cement, and the production. This time it was very successful, and Carter questions if this is the effect of the cement, and he says that yesterday was still fluid like a candle that had just melted, and soon after one night it had become hard like stone, and says that with that thing they can build a wall as fast as they want, as long as that there are enough stones, they can even build a wall around the kingdom within 5 years, but in that Roland asks what the use of it is, and says it doesn't matter with high carving, is not yet capable of defending against the enemies that are inside it, and he says that, I would prefer to transform the wooden houses of Villa Fronterica into durable cement houses, and make sure that your people will never again fall into a situation where they do not have a home to return after a calamity, and he says that in the future he will let everyone see that witches, they are the #1 production force. This is some serious slavery talk, man, I'll tell you. And while some workers do their part, Roland is happy that they spread the word, recruiting and doubling the number of stonecutters, which allowed them to have a wide time to prepare the raw material while Anna rests, and he says it's because it's very easy. She catches a disease while she works in a very dirty environment, so he can't let her. She keeps doing these things, and he thinks that in the future, when the scale of production will be even greater, just Anna won't be enough, and he says that witches shouldn't be used as consumable products, they should only be used as an engine that pushes civilization forward ahead, but he thinks that with Anna's power they were able to solve the problem related to the crooked trench, which he says is even the foundation for the wall connecting the mountain of the northern slope and the Red River that has already begun to be excavated to build a wall. It's not as easy as he imagined, but Carter tells the prince that because he lowered his states and personally show the workers on the north slope how to dig the trench during their first day of work, they are working much more in pain. He says that even though they worked hard, only a crooked trench was dug on the northern slope, and instead of him saying that it is a foundation for a wall, it is more like a long sewer. He thinks that even he and his civil engineer neighbor were called engineering slaves, because they learned it is very different. He says that this type of civil engineering problem, he basically doesn't understand anything, and he soon thinks about asking a professional for help and going there to help. He quickly, and then the Baron appears asking to speak with him, saying that he has something to report, and he asks what it was. Then the old man says that a bricklayer came to respond to the recruitment and proclaimed that he has worked in the Masons Guild before, so he asks about that guild, saying that if he remembers correctly it is a famous organization, and he says that however it is said that they are destined to undo through lack of work, which he wonders how a problem cannot happen when you work with this, and he says that this is the kind of talent they need. Now, sending the old man to bring him to meet the prince, then already in the office. From him he is looking at Anna as she studies, and in that the person he wants to meet arrives, and it's that same priest from before, so Roland asks him to put the label aside and raise his head, but when he looks up he sees Anna there, questioning herself, so both Roland and Carter go crazy, because he recognizes the girl, and she calls him Professor, and Roland. There's a thing, sending Carter to block the door, not letting him escape. Then the knight goes block his path, and Roland begins to wonder if this isn't too much of a coincidence, because a random bricklayer he recruited is actually the witch's neighbor, and in this the priest kneels down asking if it's really Anna, apologizing, saying it's great that she is still alive, and Roland thinks that in the meantime, from what it seems, he would not be an evil person against Anna, and maybe he has some secrets, and Anna is moved by that, and Roland asks, so he doesn't get nervous, telling him to calm his emotions, and he answers the questions, questioning whether he is not a Mason, and asks why he became Anna's teacher, and in that, the priest says he lost his temper, and he responds by saying that his name is Karl van Baart, and he has already been member of the Masons Guild, but now he is just a teacher in the border village, so he says that Anna is a student he taught, and says that although he doesn't know why the prince saved a witch, even if it is to make her a concubine, is better than sending her to the gallows, and the man thinks that this at least shows that the prince is not afraid of the rumors about the headquarters and incarnation of the devil, and he says that if he is able to convince his highness to have the Nana as his concubine, maybe she can escape from being hurt. This guy must be crazy, right? Possible. Nana, if you don't remember, is that little girl who was studying with him, for the love of God. God, I hope this doesn't happen. So after explaining the whole situation to Nana, he hopes that the prince understands that he hopes that just like Anna, Nana can also hide in her concubine cameras, and says that like Anna, Nana is also a lovely girl, and the prince asks if he can bring her to meet him, and says that if she really is a witch, he will ensure that she does not come to any harm, and says that in the meantime, he cannot send anyone take her away from the Pinheiro family, especially when she has not suffered any threats from her family, and he also raises the flag saying that the reason he saved Anna is not what he is imagining, but while he says everything seriously, in his head he is totally happy, because he has another witch, and says that this is very good news, and says that even though she still doesn't understand the power she has, if she is willing to help, it will definitely come in handy in the months of demon, and he says that Crook needs her help, and says that compared to meaningless speeches from witches to the evil power of the devil, he is much more inclined to believe that neither goodness or evil has something to do with the power of witches, and he also believes that this power can be controlled, and he says it doesn't matter if it's Anna or Anna, as long as they don't do anything against the law. He won't think they committed crimes, and at that he changes the subject, talking about why he was called there, asking if he had participated in the building of the wall of Castle Grey, and Carl says yes. Then the prince says that he intends to build a wall between the Red River and the beginning of the northern slope mountain, to defend against the attacks of demonic beasts, and he says that from that moment on, he will be in charge of that project. So after a while, Nana goes to meet the prince, all daring, and she asks directly to him if she is going to die, and he says that she is not going to die, because Anna is also living there, and he introduces himself to her, being the fourth Prince Rolands and Wimbledon, who when he asks the girl's name, she says she's Nana Pinheiro, and then she runs to Anna, and the prince looking at the two thinks that Anna is only 17 years old there, and he wonders how beautiful she will be when she grows up, so he returns to normal thoughts and tries to talk to them, and the people heard from the girl's teacher that she awakened the power of a witch, and she returns to ask if he is going to have him hanged, and he says of course not, and he says that those who were hanged are all idiot criminals, and she is not a criminal, much less Anna, so he says that they don't need to worry about it, and then Nana says she's not sure, because the teacher says that witches gain powers after being seduced by the devil, but she says she has never seen the devil before, and then Anna begins to comfort the girl, and Roland's questions when she discovered that she was different from the others, and she says that probably a week ago, and he says he saw a little bird twist its leg and he really wanted to help it, and after that she felt something dripping out of her hand, and he asks what happened next, which she starts remembering that she was surrounded by water, and she says that water surrounded the little bird, and suddenly, after that his leg was recovered, and then Roland sends Carter to bring a chicken, and he says that's it, he wants one that is very much alive and extremely healthy without any disease, and in that Carter will catch it, and he wonders if it could be that her power is of the type healing, and he says that her power has a very important meaning in people's lives, and he asks the girl why she still thinks witches are evil if her power is capable of healing little animals, and Nana says that the teacher said that witches are capable of doing things that common people can't, and she says that even if it doesn't seem bad, it's a trap that the devil set up to seduce more people, and she swears again that she has never really seen the devil before, and Roland says that of course she never saw the devil, because that is nothing more than a lie from church, and her teacher is one of the people who were deceived by her. So Nana asks if church is lying to people, and asks why, then he shakes his head saying that it's not about preferences, they're doing it solely for benefits, and already some time later there is a rather embarrassing double entendre scene happening, but what's actually happening is that Carter is holding the chicken that's struggling, and Roland's is holding something that is really scaring the chicken, tells him to hold it tight, and then he goes up of her hurting her, so he asks Nana to use her power to heal the chicken, and at that she says, who will try, using his magic and recovering it completely, but a few hours later the chicken, it doesn't matter, and Roland says he finally understood Nana's power, and says she can recover damaged part of the body, and yet her power cannot make it a new limb. However, if she uses the power on a limb that has been reattached, she can make the cut heal completely, and he says that however she has no power to reverse life and death, because after that, the chicken died, its healing power no longer had any effect, so he orders Carter to return it chicken to the kitchen while Nana continues crying, and she says that the prince is terrible, but he says that everything is fine, telling her not to cry anymore, instead she should go eat, so he prepares a table full of sweets for the two of them, and at the end of the afternoon Nana is taken to house, and Nana asks him why he didn't let her stay, because just like her, the girl is also a witch, and he says that she still has her family, and so far they haven't found out that she is a witch, but Nana says that it is just a matter of time, and he says that it is true, it's just a matter of time, but her family doesn't know yet, so they'll leave it at that for now, and in that he asks if Anna misses her father, and she simply says no, and at that Roland feels bitter in his mouth, but he says that Nana will come there often, in fact he will let her come every day to train her power, and asks if, like Nana, Anna also wants to go back to the academy to learn with the other kids, and he says that while he is there, the day when everyone can live a normal life will come, and he assures Anna of this. Then on another day, he says that since Calvin Batts took over the project to build the wall, he became somewhat free, and he says that every afternoon he accompanies the two witches to practice in the flower garden while he has afternoon tea, and he says that occasionally he go to the base of the mountain on the north slope to look at the progress of the wall construction, and he says it's true that in the last 2 weeks progress has been moving at a pace extremely fast, but things are still not going so well, and Barov complains to him saying that the expenditure on recent recruitment of workers is quite high and that amount of money is being taken out of his pocket, and he says that according to the financial calculations, they won't be able to hold out until autumn next year, so Roland starts getting scared, wondering what he's going to do since he's so poor, and while the prince thinks of a solution, Barov thinks that Roland's has been acting completely different lately, because in the Grey Castle the fourth Prince Roland's does what he wanted and without any fear, and his evil reputation for not having noble behavior is known to all, and he says that if the king does not promised him that he would point out with the official finance minister, he would have actually gone out and would no longer work, and as soon as he arrived at the border village, the prince had offended every noble as possible without mentioning the fight for the throne. He had no desire whatsoever to rule the city border, the administrative positions were all filled by the few civilians he brought from Grey Castle, and he says that since Roland saved that witch, the prince seems like a person completely different. Meanwhile he is thinking that building the border village depending on his money alone is not enough, but the income from that place is very miserable. And he says that mortgaging all the year's minerals for the post songbook to exchange villages of shares for the demon months, this type of equivalent exchange is basically a monopoly. And he says that the other sources of income come mainly from age, small properties, such as taverns, weaving houses and blacksmiths. Then in relation to the amount needed for morality is nothing more than a drop in the ocean, so he says they should start thinking of a way to increase the income of the border village. But in this Barov asks if he has been possessed by a demon, and he says that this is not right, because in any case, demonic powers would be dispersed in front to the amulet of divine retribution. Then it is impossible that he was possessed by a demon, but he still has plenty of suspects. Meanwhile, the red-haired man arrives at the pier of the border town saying that that place is still in precarious condition, and the man who he says that the last time he came there must have been a year ago, calling him ambassador, and says that this poor city has nothing but stones, and the ambassador says it was a year and a half ago, and he says that the duke chose a different person to come each season, and the last time he went there the border village was still in summer, and besides, leaving aside the stones, that place has all kinds of high-quality leather. So man asks what he is doing, speaking, but the redhead doesn't even care, and he says that the most important thing is that there is a huge amount of land that was not cleared for cultivation there, as an outpost of the fort. If they took over the quality of a defensive line, the vast expanse of land that lies there would be integrated into the fort. But the man who was with the ambassador begins to ask why the courtyard is empty, asking where are the minerals they should have prepared, as they said they would go that day. But the ambassador says that they must first go to the castle to see the prince, so that man accompanying him asks what they should do, asking if it could be that the village border have a new trading partner, questioning whether they sold the minerals to the village of Willow, or perhaps to the mountain of the fallen dragon, and he supposes that this must be that stupid selfish prince. But then the ambassador tells him to stop, but even so the boy tells him to look to one side, saying that that is a boat from the village of Salguero, and the ambassador think that if the prince has already contacted those cities that are at the bottom of the Red River, he will have one less chip to bargain with. So he says that if he negotiates with the plan monopoly, the negotiation will definitely not work, and even if they reach the castle, the ambassador wonders what kind of person the fourth prince is. Then he is greeted with a feast for two, and you wonder what those little wooden sticks are that are used for eating. So he looks at the prince using the raxi and tries to copy, but he obviously can't, and Roland talks to him, asking what he thought, saying that compared to cutlery normal, that pair of wooden sticks are much easier to obtain, and after strawing for their people, they will no longer have to worry about diseases entering through their mouths by using their hands to eat his food. So the ambassador thinks that that fourth prince is really inexplicable. So after the meal they go for dessert. The ambassador talks to the prince, saying that according to past customs, that should be the day that the border town the minerals, and he did not see any minerals in the yard that is in the sink. So the prince says that unfortunately a cave-in happened on the north slope of the mine last month, so your people have been trying to resume production. But he says that however, the debris in the area landslides have not been cleaned up completely, and at the current rate, he is afraid that the resumption of mine work will be delayed until next year. So the ambassador asks and tells the call leaders of the last 2 months, and he says it was not very good, and according to the convention, those pieces of stone are not enough to feed his people, and he says that the ambassador says that he must remember the 2 months of the devil from 2 years ago, when people were dying of hunger and cold, and he says that if they follow the same method of previous trading that year, he will be able to keep wheat only for 2 months, and if that's the case, his people won't be able to survive that winter. So he says that past trading methods must be abolished once and for all. But then the ambassador says that he deeply regrets this issue, and says that that tragedy definitely did not will happen again, and he says he will ask the 6 noble families to lend food together and people for a whole month, and his people can pay back slowly after him have recovered by next year. But then Roland says that if he sells the minerals to the city of Willow, he will not have to pay anything back slowly, and he says that the city of Willow is determined to use gold to buy the stones, and at the same time they want to sell for him. He delivers yogurt, bread and honey at market price, and he says that anything that can be bought with gold they sell. So compared to the strongholds item for item method songbook, the Willow City method is much more reasonable. But he says that even before talking about it, he asks if the ambassador, even though he is willing to lend the ration enough for a month, he would have all the authority necessary to make the other families decide too, and he says that looking at his family emblem, he must be someone from Madre Silva family, and he says that as one of these families, how could he convince the Duke Ryan and the other families come to an agreement, and asks if he is able to take the final decision. And then the ambassador stands back and remembers when he spoke to his father, saying saying that the new feudal lord of the frontier city, the fourth prince definitely, is not willing to exchange minerals and jewels for bread and wheat, and he tells his father that if he buy their stuff for 30% less than the market price, they will still be making a profit. But then, the man asks if his son is talking about that pig prince, and asks where he would get that ability to deal with commercial matters of the border city, ordering him not to speak anymore on this subject, and he says that the business of the border city will not change because of the arrival of that trash, and then he realizes that his father couldn't be more wrong, and he says that, in fact, just his father alone would be difficult to convince, but he still must try, and thinks about selling it to him for 30% less, and then he tells Roland that they will use the 30% price below market price to sell the minerals and jewels of the frontier city, and the offer he is doing must be higher than the price offered by Willow City, and he says he will return to Fortress Songbook the next day, and after reaching an agreement with the other families, he will bring a new deal for him, and he tells the prince that the Songbird Fortress is an option much better for him and his people, since Willow City is very far away, and although it is possible to go there, the refuge during the Devil's Months, the journey there would still not be easy. But then Roland asks what he means by not easy, and he says that something dangerous could happen. But this subconscious starts to wonder if he just threatened the prince, but then Roland starts to stutter, saying that he seems to have confused something, and he says that he intends to seek refuge in Willow City, but he also says he has no intention of going to the Song Fortress, and he's not going anywhere. But then the ambassador asks what that he is talking about, and he says that during that winter he will stay there in the border city, where the city will soon become the border of the kingdom of the Grey Castle, and he even says that it can take him to take a look at the new wall that is at the northern base of the mountain, and the ambassador is curious about what he is talking about, and Roland says that it is exactly a wall with 20 feet of height and 4 feet wide, which is connected between North Coast and Chersway River, and he says that with this wall they will be able to defeat the demonic beasts of the frontier city. Then the river will remembers all the nobles talking about this wall, and says he thought it was a joke among the nobles, and did not think that the prince would actually build a wall, and asks how he did it. A wall of that scale could not be built in less than a few years, and he also wonders where the border city got all this labor from, and in that he begins to look at the prince with different eyes, and says that he will remember everything that he said, and when he comes back he will immediately discuss with these families, and also speak who wants to take a look at that wall, and the prince says that in that era there is nothing like life, doctor, and if people didn't make babies at this time, most of them would probably sleep earlier, and Roland says that a prince like him has special rights, like leaving one of his maids and accompany him to bed, but he is very kind and so he doesn't do it. But then he starts hearing a strange noise in his room, and wonders who that is, and a woman is in her bed, and she says she didn't expect the songwriting ambassador to come back with tail between his legs like that, and says that it seems like the fourth prince had some tricks up his sleeve, under his sleeve. Then he wonders if Kelly is a killer and tries to run, but then the woman, there's a knife in the wall telling him to please not be impulsive, and he says he only sees him to talk to him, and he looks at the knife and wonders if that's the way to make a person stay to talk. Then he asks who she is, and she says she has no name, but her sisters, they call her Rational, and she says that she would first like to express her gratitude to him, and she says she is very grateful for his affection and tolerance for Konjabruxa throughout this time, and he wonders why she would be grateful. But then looking at the pendant she has, he remembers when Barov was talking to him, saying that the pattern of that coin is known as the Eye of the Sacred Mountain, and says it is an emblem of the Cooperative Association of Witches, and he has to pay more attention to that, saying that they are not someone he wants tease, so he wonders if she is a witch, and she realizes that Roland is quite a person informed, and he questions the reason why she went there is because of Anna, and he says that even so he doesn't know where he got so much information to go there at that moment, because it's already very late, and says that if he really wants to leave there with her, she should have been dead for a long time, and she says she knows that, because if he had really done that, she wouldn't want to just talk to him, and she says that the Cooperative Association of Witches doesn't like to get involved in a profane world, and then it would be controversial to kill a prince just because of a witch, but still, she is able to give him a deep and unforgettable memory, and he tells her not to worry, because she is living well, and Rakaneo says he knows that besides Anna, there is another little girl, called Nana, who is also there, and says that she arrived at that place a week ago, that she had met him face to face until now, but she says she saw everything he did with her own eyes. and he realizes that she arrived a week ago and saw everything he did and starts to getting scared, wondering if she had been following him all this time and he wasn't. Here, he tries to change the subject, saying that she wanted to have a conversation with him and says no. It could just be to thank him, but Rakaneo cuts him off by asking if he isn't tired of standing there all the time, and tells him to come closer so they can talk properly, and tell him that his appearance is not ugly and then she will not give him scare. If he doesn't fall, I'll fall easy on this witch's lips. So after calling him to the camera, he starts to think that it seems like she really has no intentions anymore, so he goes listen to what she has to say, and tells her that she can start talking, and she says that as expected. He is afraid of her and says that he is different from the other people she has met. After all, he hates them because he's afraid of them, and she says she can see fear in their eyes, but he only has curiosity, because he starts to think that the atmosphere can't change that quickly, and says that even now she was still a killer, but how did she turn into that arrogant person and say that the reason for her visit was to tell him that she is going to take Nana and Anam away, but then he gets up screaming saying that she won't do it and says that they have a good life there and no one can hurt them, and he also asks where she thinks she's taking the girls, as she doesn't have that is as safe as that one, and she says she intends to take them to the association, which is cooperative, which is where they should be, and says that the members of the association are their allies and they will no longer have to disguise themselves, but he says that they do not even have a fixed residence, and says that last month his soldier discovered in the association's camp in the hidden forest, and the footprints showed that they were heading north, but there is nothing more than great mountains in the north, and she says that that day is right and the association is currently in somewhere in the mountains, and for witches this is the safest place there is, but it is very dangerous, asking if she wants to take the girls to spend the winter in the mountains like in the wild, questioning where this is to have security, and asks if there is potable water to drink, or even if there is enough food, a warm shelter to stay in, and yet the demon months are coming soon. But what would they be thinking? But that would be more than what Barov said before. And he says that the purpose of the Cooperative Association of Witches is to bring together as many possible witches to go towards the sacred mountain together, and he says that it is because the witches can only obtain true peace by going towards the sacred mountain, and he asks her what she wants to do by going to the sacred mountain, but then she tries to deflect the question by saying she can't talk about the subject. Then he says that he certainly does not agree with it, because from now on, 2 months the whole world out there will be full of demonic beasts, and to say that even the best mountains won't be able to get rid of them. But then he has an idea saying that they can go to the sacred mountain whenever they want, and asking what they think about going to the city borders to spend the winter, and Rashino is completely surprised, and he says that they wouldn't be late to go to the mountain after winter, and the only thing that leaves Rashino in doubt is he wants the association to move there, saying that he is an interesting person, but she says that even though the prince is not afraid of them, his associates are, and says that another thing, saying that once they were revealed, the church's lackeys would go there looking for them immediately, but he keeps thinking that once they get through the demon months peacefully with the help of the witches, your people will realize that the witches are no more. But then she starts to say something else, saying that she has a reason for wanting to take the girls from there, saying that Anna is almost maturing, and he questions what that would be, and Rashino responds with a question, asking if he knows why witches are seen as the incarnation of the devil. And then she says that the awakening of most witches happens in the months of the devil, which is when rumor has it the gates of hell open, and usually ripe for a witch is the dividing line. A woman who does not awaken at 18 does not have the possibility of become a real witch, and she says that after maturing, a witch will suffer from torture of the devil, devouring his body during the devil's months every year, and the pain felt and unimaginable. It's as if something wanted to break your body and get out of it. The growing pain can be felt in every vein, every muscle, and she says that if a witch can endure all this, she can recover by resting for 4 to 5 days, but for the witches who cannot bear all this, they die in the midst of this torture, and their death is something too horrible to be seen, and that is one of the reasons why witches are seen as incarnations of the devil. And she says that with this kind of miserable death, and with the rumors spread by the church saying that this is what happens to people who believe in the devil, as time goes by, they were titled as incarnations of the devil. So he asks what happens when the witch matures, and she says that after maturing, a witch's powers become stable, and after the stabilization of power, it will increase substantially and may even develop a new field of magic. And he says that in the Elder Book it is written that witches only can reach eternal peace on the sacred mountain and will no longer have to suffer the torture of the bite of the devil in their bodies. And he asks if this is really true, and she says that nobody knows for sure, because the sacred mountain only appears in legends, but even so, if it takes the people to the association's camp, the chance of survival is much greater. And she says that if a witch which does not need to hide and can live freely. Somehow the force of torture of their bodies is softened, so he begins to think, saying that although his plans require the help from Anna and Nana, letting her suffer would create a great risk to his plan, and he agrees, saying that everything is fine, saying that Anna is downstairs and will call her to come over there, and if she accepts, she will be able to take her to the association, and as for Nana, she will only be able to see the girl tomorrow, and then she thanks him for understanding, saying that he played evil, but time she is shouting, telling Anna that she is not lying, and says that she can feel the magical power in her, saying that her body is almost mature, and says that her maturation will be in the months of the devil that starts in the next 2 months, and says that the sooner she goes to camp, the safer she will be. So Anna asks the prince if he remembers that he once asked her if she would like to be like Nana and go back to her teacher at Carl's school to learn together with the other children, and she says that she didn't answer him, and says that what he says about living like a normal person or something, she doesn't care about those things. She talks that the only thing she wants is to be by the prince's side, and that's all, and she says that the devil will not be able to kill her, and she claims that she will resist it, and then Ruxianol says she understands, and the prince asks if she will leave empty-handed, and she says no, we'll stay there, and she says she thinks a beginner who doesn't experience maturation won't understand how dangerous he is, so Roland questions if she will keep monitoring his winter all over again, but she doesn't even respond by getting close to Anna, and says she's already very close to death several times and saw several of her friends die with her own eyes, and anyway, when that day comes, she will at least be able to help the girl, and if she can't handle all this, she says she has experience about what happens after that also, and she says that in both cases, she will come and visit him when it happens. He disappears. Ruxianol's power, realizing that the ability of sound cancellation, noting that she was basically born a killer, and he talks to Anna saying that it wasn't dawn yet and that she should go back to her room and sleep a little more, and in that she smiles, calling him silly. Look how a nice atmosphere is forming. And in this Roland will speak with his people, saying that the reason he gathered everyone there, at that moment, is because he has important news to tell everyone, and he says that 4 days ago, the ambassador of Forte Cancionero got there, and he went there to exchange the minerals, but as they all know, last month, they had a terrible accident, a cave-in happened in the cave on the north slope, and since then, production could not be resumed, so everyone is worried, and Roland says he told the ambassador about their situation, and hoped that he would reserve enough food for them, and that they would pay the debt next winter, but he says that the ambassador rejected it, and there was no room for negotiation just like 2 years ago, and remember 2 years ago, everyone is scared, and he says that 2 years ago, because of the food shortage, they lost 20% of their total production, and he says that some people lost their brothers, and others have lost their children, but then he asks them again, asking how much they are prepared to lose again, and then everyone starts asking him to save them, and he says he will not leave his people, not even the one person, who he says according to the informal market system, 2 months of our production can be exchanged for half a year of food, but the strong songsmith never traded honestly with them, so everyone starts to say that they are shameless, and they betrayed them all this time, and he says that in this way he sold minerals to the merchants of the city of Salguero, and exchanged them for some boats of food, and it's enough for them to survive the whole winter, and everyone will be fine fed, and he says that this is great, but he says that because of this his relationship with the Fort Songbook is damaged, so they will have to spend the winter there in the border town, and he knows that some people are worried about his ability to face the beasts demonic when they attack, and most people have seen that a firm and stable wall is being built on the west side of town, and he says he wants to tell them that the beasts demonic creatures are not stronger than wild creatures that are inside the forest, and he speaks that they are not able to climb walls or even move stones with their mouths, and even if they have a tough skin and thick flesh, they are a bunch of easy targets, and he tells his people, or if they are determined to hide in the warehouses of Longsong Fortress and starve to death as cowards, or they are determined to protect their king and their children and protect the city border until the last moment under his command, and he promises them there and now that as long as they defend the city until the end of the demon months, everyone who fights on the wall will receive 25 real silver as payment. Then he says that for anyone who suffers misfortune and lose their lives, their families will receive 5 real gold as compensation, so everyone starts to be abandoned, and he says that they are determined to fight for the prince and swear that they will protect the border town until their death. Then at night in the fort they start laughing, saying that that naive prince wants to leave them aside and do everything on his own, and one of them says that the prince doesn't even have bricklayers and he's just relying on stacking stones that have not been sharpened, and talks about putting wet mud between them, and says he fears that the walls will crumble on their own when they reach a certain height, and they keep buzzing. But their leader asks what Petrovi thinks, and he says that he originally wanted to keep but the the sooner they get the ore at 30% below the price they will make a profitable negotiation, but he says that even so the prince does not intend to sell the minerals just for the strong songbook. He is intending to sell the minerals for 50% of the price below the market, which means that it intends to drastically increase mineral production in the next year, and that way they can earn much more than they earned last year. And Petrovy says that he still intends to manufacture iron tools and sell them himself, and it doesn't matter where. Iron ore is a growing product in the market, but he says that these are not the points, main ones, and the leader asks what the point would be, and he says that if he can defend the city fronteriza, this will definitely be good news for the strong songbook, as they will not will have to spend energy dealing with demonic beasts every year, and he says that even so the fight for throne will only last 5 years, and after that they can get a much more frontier city, prosperous, and at that moment the strong songbook will become one of the 3 largest kingdoms in the territory. And he says that his advice is that the strong songbook should send people to help the prince build the wall and still help defend the border city, and in this the leader says he is right, but he says that this is thinking like a merchant, only being able to see advantages and disadvantages, and he tells himself whether the frontier city is thriving or not doesn't really matter. What matters is that this territory is yours and no one can lay their hands on it, and he says it doesn't exist exception, not even for a prince. Meanwhile Carter goes to the prince asking if what he has extraordinary strength, and he says that's exactly it, and he says that thanks to his ability Diana, those iron plates could be welded without even using anything to seal them, and he says that the steam engine is something that brought the matrix force that was necessary for the first industrial revolution, and says that even though it seems rudimentary, it exudes an incomparable beauty of technology and art, and he begins to praise the simplicity of that as a naive mechanic that he is. But then Carter asks if he's sure that pile of metal isn't a machine evil cult ceremony, then he just smiles, and 5 minutes later he already has boiling water, and wonders if that really is a furnace. Meanwhile Anna is throwing fire until she realizes that something is wrong, and begins to observe all the gears turning, and notices that this is what the prince said about the hidden forces in nature, and Carter thinks that the prince said that this thing could replace arm strength and animal strength, and he realizes that that strength springs forth. He fears that not even 10 horses could handle that, and he says that training one qualified rider is 15 years old, but to make those machines it only took 3 days. He says that she does not need to be fed, nor does she feel cold or hunger, and is also not affected by arrows, swords and spears, and says that her shot at the battering ram in front of her would be able to have a voracious weapon on the battlefield, and he realizes that with that machine there would be no reason to have the existence of traditional gentlemen, so he starts to get sad while the prince is very happy, and he says that with this steam engine his cultivation plan again takes a step forward. A new era. So already in the castle, going to his room he gets another scare, and Rock'n'Roll says that she can trust the rumors. Then he realizes that she is there again, and asks if she could give him a little privacy, asking if she thinks that is her home for coming and going as she pleases, and she says that it is said that the 4th prince is ignorant, incompetent and has a vile personality, but in fact compared to the cutting master, he is not, is inferior in no way, and she asks if that drawing on that paper is a blueprint for iron furnace, but then he is left wondering how she managed to get that plant secret that was locked in his desk drawer, and she asks if he calls that a steam engine. She says yes, saying that this really is a plant. But without Anna's help, it would only be more a drawing on paper, and Rock'n'Roll asks what it can do, and he says it can do several things. It can move ores, drain water, melt iron and forge, and is quite useful when a massive force is needed, so she smiles saying that she will keep it, because in her association has people who can control fire, but he says he did not agree with that, and she says that of course she won't take it and won't give anything in return, that he gives it to him. A secret letter that was delivered by a carrier pigeon that she intercepted, and in that he takes and she says that the sender seems to be employed by Thierry, and says that the air in it is not at all stable, because in the letter she says that she cannot make the same mistake in the future and that she will eliminate him during the chaos of the demon months. Then he remembers Thierry, saying that he really had a maid by that name, and if he remembers correctly, the old Roland loved to eat her tofu, but Rock'n'Roll says that even so there was a signature on that letter, and it seems that it was one of his brothers, and she questions what he intends to do, not even counting on her help to calm the things, that he says he will have to bother her, and if possible, he wanted her to help. He finds the person behind that letter, and in that she gets his order saying that she will take that plant as a reward, so then he's at his desk, when Carter goes to him, saying that his maid, Tiri, died yesterday, and he asks what happened, and Carter says that she fell from the balcony of her room, and there was no sign of a fight, and the guard didn't see it either. No strangers enter or leave the room, so he says she may have fallen to her death because she is careless, and surely this was an accident, and Roland simply says that it is a shame, and he leaves the funeral arrangements to the head maid, and when Carter leaves he asks what that she got from Tiri, and she says she didn't get anything, because she killed herself when he saw her, and at that he is surprised, questioning if she did not dominate her, as he thought she had experience with this kind of thing, and she says she tied the girl up, but didn't expect her to hide it, poison between her teeth, and that she would not hesitate one bit and use it. Then she says that he can only fake an accident so that it would look like she fell to her death, and says that even so she couldn't hear anything directly from her, which means she was left time, but she says she found something in her room that looked like a letter from his family, and says that the letter puts Tiri as the older sister, and unfortunately the letter only has normal force talk. But on the opposite side she tells about the maritime scene she was in, and she says that for what knows two of his brothers are not able to see the sea from their location, and she wonders if the person behind this would be his third sister who is in the waterport, Blue, and he says that this is probably the case. The third Princess Garcia may have the family of her sisters with a hostage, and he says that she treated Tiri like a chess piece whose objective was to murder him, and she says that the way Tiri killed herself without even thinking before she was placed alongside the prince she was trained for at least 2 or 3 years, and he thinks that as expected the race for the throne will not end easily like this, and he says that even if he does not fight for it, throne does not mean that he will be out of the game, so he says that for the throne he subordinates. They will have no doubt, and he thinks that similar things will still happen in the future, and the original says that there is someone there, and says that he will leave before she arrives, and he is very surprised that she can do that even on the moon of the day, and then Barov arrives saying that the people he was looking for to fight during the months of the devil have already responded to their recruitment, and say that after they go after them people have been filtered and are waiting for him down below the wall, so he is excited to go see them. And Barov says he will take him, but asks if he really intends to use those people against the demoniac beasts, and arriving there he realizes that Barov's concerns were not confused, because there are only thin and weak people there, and he asks Carter if those are the people who responded to the recruitment, and he says yes, because those were the people who were filtered according to their requests, and they are not criminals, they are over 18 years old, and under 40, and he says their bodies are not severely injured, and he himself shocked each of them, and at that the prince becomes desperate, saying that everything is fine, because he can't have too high expectations at the beginning, and seeing that the overall production was very low, common people had nothing but food and clothes so they could hinder them, so obviously they couldn't have a strong physique, and he says that a troop made only by ordinary people, especially in this era, it's a very creative thing to do, but he starts to get motivated, and in that Barov talks to him, saying that even though it's the beginning, he should take a good look at those, who asks which of them can at least use a sword or a blade, and says that he recommends hiring professional mercenaries to protect the wall, and says that these people can be used to do other work instead of protecting that wall, and then Rulin says no, saying he will use them, and he says that a full troop of age must originate from the people themselves, while they are feudal troops, troops of a not so distant past or modern troops, they have all proven this rule countless times. Then Carter says he should start teaching them how to wield a sword tomorrow, and he asks why use a sword, and he says that if they put him in formation, they will start running, and he says one more thing, they should call that hunter axe of iron until there, and they will all look first at what he will do, then at noon he gathers again all of them, and Carter asks what he is doing, and says that if he is going to patriate warriors, he has several methods to complete the training, and asks why the prince will use that ineffective method, and he says that the training is just to stay in that position all afternoon, and just for doing that they will get an extra egg during lunch, and he says that eggs are very expensive, and he knows this very well, and asks what kind of training method this is, sending look at them, because he only has food in his eyes, but Rulin says he just has to observe well and remember everything, because the next days of training will be the same as today, but he says that of course, there will be some small changes, but he will write down everything that has to be made on paper, and in it he says that in the age of bladed weapons, a batch of warriors, qualified people cannot be trained in 2 or 3 months, and he says that furthermore, he doesn't need those Spartan warriors who can get rid of those beasts in just their underwear, so he says that individual combat and the strength of a troop does not need to be exceptional, but they all have to be well disciplined and follow without hesitation every order given to them. But he thinks that even so, to do this, he will have to bring all the exercises there of military academy training, and he says that in just half a month, the training exercise. Military was able to unite students who came from different cities and countries into one unit, and he says that no matter what the means were, the progress is still evident. He starts looking at a boy who is shaking as he stands, and he thinks that when people fully understand what discipline is, it will be easier for him to implement the next plan. And in the late afternoon, lunchtime comes and Carter says that they all have extra eggs like reward and they are happy, but then Carter starts banging pots and pans telling them not to stay pushing each other, and says that the prince ordered them all to make a row of 4 lines and were to receive the cutlery and lunch in an orderly manner, and he says that anyone who makes a mess, the order will have to go to the end of the line, and it will be the last person to get the food, and he says that those who cause problems will be taken by the guards, and hearing all that, they quickly form an Indian daughter, and Carter thinks the prince is overreacting, because he is even teaching them rules, but while he is thinking, everyone starts talking about the iron axe, and the prince passes by with it, and he says that everyone will have a rest period after lunch, and they will walk to the camp where the soldiers stay, and he says that that person, the iron axe, will be your captain, and says that he will be teaching all of them how to prepare a tent later, and they are surprised that the iron axe is working for 4 princes now, and they start to have a slight prejudice, so Carter asks if the prince will really appoint someone from the Sand Nation as captain, and he says he is not someone belonging to the Grey Castle, and another thing, he is not a person from your continent, and he says that witches, they also do not belong to the Grey Castle, but they belong to the border town, and other than that, they have Carter to keep praising her all over, and he tries to keep talking to the prince, but he says that the border town doesn't care about a person's past life, as long as she has not committed any crime against the laws of the kingdom, they are still her people, and then he simply changes the subject, saying that he has just written the training regulations, and he says that instead of worrying about the people of the Sand Nation, he thinks he should worry more about that there, and says that even so, there are some points he has to worry about remembering, and he says that every day, at noon, they have to take everyone for a run around the city until the sun goes down, and they all have to do it, and if nobody gives up, he'll add an extra egg to their next meal, and then Carter says he can understand everything. Call S. Jim, go through culture training, and Carter asks if the prince plans to teach them to read and write, and says that these are completely useless things to learn to fight against demonic beasts, so the prince can no longer stand that talk, and asks, who said that, because a troop that is prepared to fight has to be a short troop, and he says that this is something that history has already taught them. So, already in the government affairs office, Roland is full of sleep, when Rochnol comes saying that he has been waking up later and later lately, and he still has the audacity, saying that he ate half of his breakfast while it was hot and says that now it's already cooled down, and he realizes that she's so used to that place that she doesn't even try more hide in the full moon of the day. Then he questions if no one taught her that she should be more polite in front of a prince, and he says he remembers she took it well, the series of etiquette rules when they first met, and Rochnol begins to make himself cynically asking if he wants her to be educated that way, but she says that he doesn't care about it anyway, and says that besides, she noticed that he also hates the boring rules of etiquette, and he begins to wonder if there is something she doesn't really understand, and wonders if she can read minds, so he tells her she can do as she pleases, saying that in the future, when she wants breakfast, you can eat it all, because if he wants to eat, he will prepare another portion, so, she gets all happy about it, and he starts looking at his plants again, and she says, who took a look at the order form that was on the table, asking why he's buying so much infinite ice, and she finds it strange because it's winter, and if he wants to drink cold beer, he just has to leave the drink outside the house overnight, and he takes a look at the papers she's talking about, and he says it's to prepare for archery, frozen, and says that the current temperature is not low enough, and in that she is amazed, saying that the prince is a person who pays attention to the small details. Then he says that although Rochnol is not an enemy, she is not like Anna, someone that he knows very well, and he says that as long as he is understanding what kind of person she is, he better keep some secrets, and says that his next plan is to manufacture firearms, and unlike steam engines, they do not require self-knowledge, technological, and he says that as soon as the method of manufacturing firearms spreads, will be very disadvantageous for your development plan, and he says that the nobles like to use saltpeter to freeze drinks during the summer, and infinite ice is just a fancy nickname, but he says that saltpeter is an essential material for production of gunpowder, and returning to speak with Roshnol, he questions something else, saying that in addition to search for the sacred mountain, he asks if the Witches Cooperation Association also trains assassins, but Roshnol says no, saying they are just a group of miserable people who came together through an unusual dream, and she says that she only does 2 years since she joined the association, and he questions whether she was working before with another person, wondering if there are other people besides him who also accept the witches, but she says no, saying that if they knew she would become a witch, they wouldn't have even let her enter through the gate, and she says that if it weren't for their usefulness, she suspects they would have killed her long ago, and he asks if she could talk more about it, and she says that when the opportunity arises, will appear, will tell you, but she says she knows what worries you, and tells you to. He is carefree, because she has been free for 5 years and no longer needs to work to someone, and after hearing her words, he becomes thoughtful, and 5 days later, he is in the yard with Carter and thinks that finally the first firearm is ready, and he says that even with the unforeseen events throughout the process, in the end every man loves a gun, and he says that his initial intention was to build a steam engine to manufacture the weapon with greater efficiency, and he says that since it was the first machine, he didn't saw reasons for so much perfectionism, but he says that at this rate, before the months of the demons arrive, the most he will be able to produce is 4 copies, and in that Carter asks the prince how he plans to use that thing he calls Flint to fight the demons, and he says he will select the most talented hunters, the border city, and then he will form an elite team and allow they use those weapons, and at that Carter is surprised, asking why he doesn't chooses within his patrol squad, and then he begins to remember those figures of the squad, and thinks it's because he keeps having the feeling that this patrol squad is not so reliable, and then in the sewers of Roland's castle, 2 men are running when one of them attacks the other, and asks him to surrender or he will end up as a gray dog, and in that he remembers the gray dog, and says that definitely they didn't let them enter the castle, and in that he manages to take the weapon from the man who was chasing, and hits him on behalf of the gray dog, and then he asks how the simple patrolman dares him to hurt, but he says that while they were loitering and gambling and getting drunk at the bar, they were training their skills all to protect their city, and he says that in the meantime they allied themselves with the strong songbook and did not hesitate in bringing chaos to his city, and he says he certainly won't allow that, but as he tries to attack one of the guys, another one appears behind him and ends up killing him, the guard, and he says he didn't expect him to be so tough, and the man says that he is like a cockroach that even after being stepped on several times still insists on surviving. Then he throws the man to the ground, but he manages to take the knife and throw it at them, erasing that light, and they start running after him in that total darkness, and already in the barn. From the castle he says that without a doubt the target of the invasion is the barn, and says that if lack of food there, his only option would be to seek refuge in the Songhouse fort, and he says that they finally got Mr. Feldel who cares about the people, and even being the captain of the patrol squad, he can't even protect the barn, and in that he notices the men coming, but it is too late, he is thrown away, and that man asks what the problem is, questioning if he won't run away anymore, and says that now he will know the consequences for being oppressive to Doc Ryan, but even so the captain speaks that the prince will not allow their plan to succeed, but the man begins to question whether he really thinks the prince will save him, and he sees in that resistance and orders his henchmen to kill him quickly, and he would not forget the mission either that Doc Ryan entrusted to them, and the captain begins to wonder if this will be his end, but in that a voice appears, saying that they are having a lot of fun in the territory, other people, and in this Rashi does not show himself to them, saying that wanting to kill someone in front of her, she might think it's inappropriate, and then everyone questions, who is she, and she says she is one of the members of the castle, and asks who they would be, questioning if they are rats that came through the drops, and after she falls to the ground the man says that it doesn't matter who she is, they should just kill her, so Rashi doesn't get too serious, passing the plague on everyone while the half-grog captain still wonders who is that woman, but ends up fainting, and in the barn the next day, Carter is wondering who the hell stopped the invaders, saying that that seriously injured captain I wouldn't be able to defeat so much alone, and he says that the only possibility is that someone interfered in the conflict, and that person moved freely without needing a blanket. This did not allow the enemies to resist, and he thinks that except for the bodies and blood on the ground, all the objects around are buried and there are no signs of a struggle, and he says that those barrels of preserved meat don't have a single scratch, and he questions how someone managed to achieve such a level of mastery, and he says that even though the swordsman who trains every day, what would be the title of swordsman knight, that he is so proud compared to that, and then a man comes to report to him, saying who confirmed the identity of the bodies, saying that 287 were former members of the squadron Border City Patrol, and says that the other is still unknown. and Carter asks about the 2 unconscious people who were taken, and he says he heard that the captain, Brian, will receive local medical treatment, and the man named Ferocious Scar is in the dungeon, and in that Carter tells him to wake up the Fear Scar, because he is on his way to ask some questions and also sends the man to clean everything there. Meanwhile, Roland finds out about everything, and asks why they are still in such a hurry, saying that they still have 5 years to fight for the throne, and only a few months ago they started daring to invade your castle, wondering if it's so hard to let people enjoy the winter in peace, and he says that if it weren't for rationality he fears he would already be dead there now, and she says that even if she wasn't there they wouldn't have been able to kill her, and tells him to remember that Anna sleeps right in the room below him, so he questions, what does she think about coming to live in the castle and being your personal guard, and offers her 2 gold coins per month, and says it's double what Anna gets, asking what she thinks about the proposal, and he says that she will live in a house with a garden, receive annual vacation, and she will also receive it even when she is off, but she ends up asking for it, apologizing to him, saying that he cannot abandon his fellow members of the Cooperation Association of Witches, but then Roland tells them all to go there, and says that as soon as winter finish the border city will start a big reconstruction plan, and he says that after there will be room for everyone, and it says that witches will also be able to walk the streets without being discriminated against, and no one will see them as evildoers, so she says he will see the possibility when this happened, and he ends up getting frustrated saying that his recruitment was poorly managed, thinking that he needs to improve his tactics, and in this, he talks to her again, asking if she has escorted Nana back safely, and she says yes, saying she was super scared, and he says of course, because waking up a little girl who usually only heals chickens to take care of 2 wounded men full of blood in the middle of the night, and says he really overdid it this time, but then he goes back to business, asking what her opinion is on the invasion, asking if she has any idea which of her dear brothers did this, and she says the trouble was started by corrupt patrolmen, and she feels that none of this has anything to do with her brothers, and he asks why, and she says it's because they were very careless, to the point, to fight among themselves during the mission, and furthermore they did not try to fight each other when they realized the failure, and at least 2 of them survived, and she says it doesn't seem like it his brother's style, as it is more like amateur stuff, and she says that anyway his knight went to the dungeon in search of confessions, and speaks, who believes that he will soon know the truth, and she even remembers those guys asking sorry, and he says that compared to his brother's subordinates, those were quite assholes, and already in another place the prince is walking with Carter, when he goes to see that captain who was hit, he is surprised to see the prince, and he says that already knows all about his act of courage, and Brian is a true hero, but he talks that he is not, but rather his deceased friend, but he tells him not to worry, because he will have a burial worthy of a hero, and he says that by the way that man called Fear Scar confessed to all the crimes he committed, and he was sentenced to death for hanging, and he says it will be in 3 days, and every day he gets better, and he asks because he doesn't show up for the execution, but then the captain says that the Fear Scar claims to be of noble blood, and nobles can use gold coins to atone for their crimes, and he says it would be affront if he did that, but the prince asks if it would be affront to the nobles of the Strong Songbook, and he says that the Fear Scar is indeed a distant relative of the Elk family, but he has no titles or lands to his name, and he says that in addition to invading a prince's castle, he tries to burn the supplies, and put the lives of more than 2,000 citizens at risk. These 3 infractions alone are unforgivable, and he says that if he managed to burn the supplies, the order of the border town would be completely destroyed in a single day, and he says that in front of such a malicious act, of course they won't forgive. I'm liking it more and more. Of this prince, he certainly knows that he was making a firm push, and then he tells Brian to just rest in peace in the castle as he has reinforced the patrol with new members, and he says that as soon as the months of the demons are over, he will organize a ceremony of when in heart to him, then he is surprised by it, and he says yes, because after that he will be one of his knights, and then already in the city dwelling, the recruits are trained early, and the Iron Axe asks everyone to be alert, because the prince is going to do the inspection, and he wonders what they usually say when they inspect the troops, and he starts thinking about what to say in his speech, and he says that anyway he will pick someone random to talk to, showing his best caring side, and improve his reputation, and that should be enough. Then he goes to the first boy he sees asking if they have been training hard, asking if it is exhausting, and if they have eaten well, and he imagines that everything should be fine like this, then they will react the same way he saw on TV, and then the boy simply kneels down and falls on the ground in front of him, and he wonders why the boy knelt down, but when he looks at the boy he wonders if there isn't something wrong there, and he notices all of them. Very excited that he was injured to see them train and also to ask if they are tired, and in that he says that they don't have to do that the next time they see, and tells the boy to get up, and he says that it looks like the food distribution is good because they are much more energetic than when the troop was created, and he says for the boy that if he has any suggestions or ideas about the training he can tell you at any time, and he says that this includes improvements that can be made including food, and he will do his best to make sure they have the nutrition they need to the training. So the boy actually talks to him saying that he thinks they are few people and say that with the training they have now when the monster beasts attack, they will only be able to defend a third of the wall, and they say that this is true because they alone will certainly not be enough, and he says that the prince must need to recruit soldiers from another city to become the main force, but then he asks them to stop and asks what the boy's name is, and he says it's Van Air, and he says that their observation skills are very sharp, and he says yes, it's quite unrealistic to let just that troop defend the entire wall alone, but he says that to some extent evil beasts are just variations of wild animals, so they don't have the ability to think and plan like humans like him, so he says that Iron Axe has already proven that point, and he confirms what the prince is saying that normal Manika beasts are no different from wild animals, and he talks that they even have habits and characteristics in common, but he didn't see many beasts, Manikas, so he is not sure, and the prince says that of the Red Water River to the foot of the northern sloping mountain is 600 meters, so they can put obstacles like fences, holes and trenches, and he says that those dumb animals will naturally be forced to turn around and focus on certain areas they will be waiting for. But then Iron Machado asks if that wouldn't be too dangerous, after all the defense he depends on arrows and spears which he fears will not last long. And the prince says that with spears and arrows it is true, but now they have a new weapon that is excellent, and also more reliable than equipped troops, so he is surprised by this, and in the field, as a test, he shows the new weapon they got, and the prince is surprised. That worked, and Carter keeps asking if this is the gunpowder, and the Iron Axe why. Your Turn says that it is a punishment from the heavens, the thunder of the gods, but then Roland calls them to check the result with him, and he says that once someone knows that 1 to 1 and 5 to 7.5 is the smallest combination of sulfur, coal and saltpeter it can produce the same effect, and he says that the components can be taken from various places and the formula has no technical limitations, and gunpowder is the protagonist's best friend. From Satsai, some protagonists resolve it with violence, others with a little power, but Roland, he's attacking grenades on the others, then they get close to the crater that was created, and the axe. DeFaro says that if the troops could use that type of weapon the border city would never again be afraid of the threat that beasts and demons pose, and he asks the prince if a large quantity can be produced, and he says it should not be impossible, that when the months of the demons arrive, they will have around 20 to 30, so he says that combined with spears and arrows it should be enough, and he says that this will be your trophy, and after some time Rajnal starts talking that from her point of view, her world only has two colors, black and white, and she says that even though it is difficult to explain, this takes away her restrictions from the common things of life, and she can move freely, and when she changes a hole in a place she looks, she discovers entrances that never existed in the real world, so she says that inside the snow, up and down, back and forth, front are not fixed concepts, they exchange and sometimes even overlap, and she says that by following those lines that change infinitely, she can float and cross objects too, so she says that of course, sometimes she can see other colors in that black and white world, and she says that witches are the fusion of magic, and she can see the flow and the weakening of the power within their bodies, and those are the only colored spots inside the snow, and she says that Anna's color is strong and rich. While she is looking for the girl, she notices Rajnal and she is surprised and reveals herself to the girl, and Anna asks if it was really her, and she asks Rajnal if what she used now was her power, but she ends up not answering, asking if she finished her training, saying that she brought some fish dry to her, asking if the girl wants some, and when the girl answers that she does, she tells her to wash her hands, but she says she doesn't need to, so Rajnal thinks there are witches who can control the fire in their association, but they don't compare to Anna, but she thinks that the stronger the magic, the stronger the rebound, and when the demonic torture begins, the pain that she will have to face is unbearable, so she asks Anna if she is sure she wants to stay even there. Then she says that there are several sisters in the association, and she must take good care of the girl, and she says that she can only stay inside the castle, asking if she isn't bored, and she says that even if they have a lot of food or things, they have the same goal, and she says that a girl like her, who has so much power, will be very welcome in the association, and she also says that she is afraid that the girl will not survive the winter this year, but in this Anna asks Rajnal where she lived before joining the association, association, and she says she lived in a large city in the east, near the capital, and in this Anna asks if she was happy before. She remembers when she was imprisoned and chained. So she questions why Anna is asking this, and Anna says that she lived in the old border village district and her father sold her to the church for 25 gold coins, and she says that the prince took her out of the cell and she is very happy living there, and Rajnal is surprised, but tells her that she can't leave that castle, and except for Roland and Wimbledon, everyone hates witches, and she says she doesn't care about that. Furthermore, he says he would change that, and she asks which place makes Rajnal the happiest. If the cooperative association of witches are there, and she says that if the sacred mountain that they are looking for a peaceful home, so she thinks she has found her sacred mountain. And at that Rajnal tries to fight back, but then Nana appears crying and runs towards Anna, and asks the girl crying what she should do, and meanwhile Roland is sleeping calm, when Rajnal comes to him, asking if he is still sleeping, and says, Nana's father is there, and says that he knows that Nana is now a witch and he stays surprised that her secret has been revealed, so he runs away saying that this could be an opportunity to bring Nana there, and even her entire family, and he wonders what Pinheiro will do after learning that his daughter is a witch, and he wonders if the nobleman will keep quiet and beg to hide the truth, or he will ask you to resolve that situation. Complicated, and then he enters the room, and her father starts asking for his daughter back. Nana's father shouts for the girl to come to his side, but she asks her father if he is going to sell her to the church, and he asks what the girl is talking, saying that the church doesn't want a silly girl like her, and tells them both to go home soon, but the prince says he would like him to get that thing off his chest first, and he says that he believes the nobleman already knows that his daughter is a witch, so he asks what he means, saying that he doesn't understand, so she tells her father that she has become a witch, apologizing to him. Then he hits the table saying that this is nonsense, and he says that it must have been Carl who told her to say that again, so the girl gets even more scared, and Anna looks at Roland, and after he nods, she shows the guest a fireball in her hand, showing her flame power to him, but then Nana starts yelling at Anna not to do that. Nana's father asks the prince what is happening, and he says, who believes there may be a misunderstanding going on between them, but asks if you can have a serious conversation now, and after telling everything he says he understood, and says that Nana coming to the castle was just to train her magical powers, and the prince agrees with that he understood, but he was a little suspicious of the interpretation that her father had made, wondering if he looks like someone who would put his hands on little girls. Then he says that the skills Nana's healing powers are very precious for the wounded, and says that she would like her to stay in the village of Border to help you fight the fears of the devil, so Pinheiro apologizes to the prince, saying that he doesn't think he has any other choice but to refuse, because when the months of demon arrive, that place will be very dangerous, so he would never allow them to put it in danger, but the prince says that danger is relative, and besides, opportunities come with risk, and he says that in his knowledge, her father was a brave knight, and the title that he inherited it thanks to his heroic deeds in battle, so Pinheiro gets excited talking. That was certainly it, and he says that at that time his father led a troop to face a incredible evil beast and defeated it, and he says that even now he has it hanging above his victory in the prize of that battle, a great horn of the demonic beast. Then Roland questions if he did not abandon his father's legacy, and says that normally nobles never dress like him, and he says that besides that the nobleman's hands are full of cases, and he says that probably with Duke Ryan's repression in those last years, the Pinheiro family has had difficulties in regain past glory. Then Pinheiro says that this is really true, and the prince claims that he is not like the other nobles who do nothing, and instead he still carries the spirit of the knights and always practices with the sword, and so Pinheiro becomes more confused by the boy's deduction, and says that if he agrees to stay in the border village, help repel the demonic beasts and perform well in battle, he will give a piece of land befitting with that of a viscount, and so Pinheiro says he understands the prince, saying he is just worried, and could not send Nana back to the fortress of great music if the songbook became the great music and the border turned into the border, and he says that no one has ever defeated the demonic beast there, and he doesn't want his daughter to perish if he waits with the battle, so he stays more and more confused, and Roland talks to him, saying that the fortress of great music is not like the village of Border, and that place is infested with spies and disciples of the church, and he says that if the secret of Nana is discovered, memes, the prince will be able to save her, and he says that of course, he will prepare a boat at the docks for safety, and if they really fail, Nana will be the first to board, and they will certainly be safe, and this affects Pinheiro, and he says, who will trust the prince, but then in addition he leaves his place, and kneels before, saying that he is willing to fight by your side, and everyone is happy about it, but Nana asks why she would leave, and asks why he said that, telling Roland that he is not going anywhere. My friend, I want this couple together so much, but so much, and then already in the office of government affairs, the Barovian begins to speak to the prince saying that he is not only training civilians, but he is also producing weapons, and he only has half the capital left according to the sales, and he says that if this continues, they will not reach the end of the demon months, and asks what they are going to do. Then the prince understands that he used everything in his safe, and tells him not to worry because if they failed to defend the border village, he would be the first to go. Although, Barovio is still a bit apprehensive, but the prince tells him to go and take care of the jobs now, and he starts to feel like his wallet has become empty, and he thinks they have to use his personal money, because if the border village's defenses collapse, he will be able to back out, so Roche doesn't appear asking if he lied to him, saying that he never planned to leave the border village, so he starts to get nervous and say that the border town is already difficult as it is, and some things are made to be unforeseen, and she says she has no idea what nonsense he's talking about, because if the life of a prince, it's that hard, how hard would life be for people like her, and she says that even if she didn't become king, as long as he survives those 5 years, they will be victorious, and she says that instead, him worrying about it, he better spend more time with Anna, and she says she's afraid she won't have plenty of time left, and the prince says he believes she will survive the demon months, and says that she said she wouldn't lose to demonic torture, and he trusts her, but Roche doesn't, but he has the courage to trust a witch, saying that they are the ones cursed by devil, and he asks why he wouldn't trust her, since she knows he trusts her so much, and there he stands in disbelief looking at him and says that it wasn't a lie. Then the prince asks if she is a lie detector, and he says of course, because he was never much of a lie, and Roche, not changing the subject, asks why it's so noisy outside, and she says, who goes to see what is happening, but Nis notices that it is snow, and says that it is snowing, and they look, and he says it's time to check the results of the crankcase and the iron axe on these 2 days. Then he goes to the training camp, and when he gets there he sees everyone shooting, and the iron axe is all happy for having hit, and he asks how his training was, and he reports to the prince that he understood all the points he had passed on. Then the prince thinks he really is a warrior, and he can grasp any weapon very quickly, and he says that the iron pipe of the gods that he granted him is really powerful, and says that if he had this before, he probably wouldn't have been in such a deplorable state against that demonic hybrid, and then they kneel and thank the prince for having given so much power, saying that it will not disappoint him, and the prince thinks he does not need it all, so he asks the crankcase if he has mastered the basics, and he says he understands how to use the volume of production, so the prince says he knows about it, and says that in addition to the 2 they have, 2 more are being made, and he says they will be ready in about 2 days, and he says that launching the firearms era is more complicated than he thought it would be, and he says he doesn't have much time left, after all the months of the devil have started. So a little. Then Roland is climbing the wall, and everyone salutes him, and he thinks he should have taught a greeting, and at that the crankcase asks the iron axe if he found anything, and he says he didn't find any sign of a demonic beast, saying that according to his experience, there aren't many demonic beasts on the first snowy day, and he says that those with mutation are just weak animals, so the prince asks him to remain alert against them, but one of the soldiers tells them to look at the horizon, and they see an animal coming in their direction, and realize that it is a demonic beast, and they ask the prince what they should do, asking if must sweat the alarm, and Roland says that as in training, they are the ones who must judge whether to sweat or not, and he says that for that, they have much more experience than him, and in that one of the soldiers starts to shake as he picks up the bow, but even so he doesn't move, and Roland realizes that it seems that the training was worth it to maintain discipline on the wall, and he says that when he encounters beasts demonic, he must observe calmly, and only then will he be able to organize his defense quickly, and accordingly, and then the animal continues to go forward as it starts to pick up speed, and the prince looks at it, and they realize it looks like a variation of a fox, and the iron axe agrees, saying that it seems like he hasn't been infected for a long time, and says that she is not a threat, and the prince says that it seems that she really was infected with the breath of hell, and the beast for her. Once he turns to Jiraiya with red eyes and very angry, he bends down to start running, and the iron axe asks the prince to be careful, as she probably wants to jump over him. From the wall, as the beast approaches, the iron axe aims at it, and when the fox jumps, he launches his arrow, hitting the creature directly directly in the throat, and then Roland is surprised, and Carter says it was a good thing they didn't let her jump over him, otherwise it would have been a disaster, and Roland notices that the animal's blood is black, and asks if this is because of the infection of demonic power, but he wonders why wizards can maintain their sanity after of awakening, and says that if he has the opportunity, he will definitely go to the impassive mountain range, and Roland asks the Iron Axe what happens if someone is bitten by a beast demonic, wondering if they will become something like the beast, and then the Axe of Iron says that of course not, because the person will simply die if bitten, and so Roland is more relaxed, happy that this is not a zombie apocalypse, and says that if that were the case, he wouldn't have the technique to collect the zombie virus antigen, and comes back to the demon's flesh, asking if they can eat it, but at that Carter lets go, asking how they could eat those incarnations of the devil, and says that all of them were infected by the breath of hell, and the Iron Axe says that the knight is right, for he once served the flesh of demons to dogs and they died shortly after eating it, and at that the prince thinks that this is a pity, and they are surprised at his speech, and he says that frontier life is low on food supplies, so if they could at least eat the flesh of demonic beasts, winter would be the harvest period, and he asks everyone who don't understand this, because with all those insane beasts running from the forest to the village, from the border, they wouldn't need any hunting equipment, but while he's thinking about the ideal situation, someone comes to report something to him and says that there were injuries, but he is in doubt, as the demonic beast has just died, and he questions how they got injured, and the man says that according to the information from the battle hospital, the injured are not from wall troops, and yes, the workers of the northern inclined mine. So in the meantime, Nana looks quite worried and Roshnoi asks what's wrong, wondering if they're bored now that she is not there, and the girl is surprised, saying that she scared her, and Roshnf says that Anna is still working, so she should be back in the afternoon, and Nana asks if she is doing that cement, and she says that it looks like it does, and at that Roshnf quickly steals the girl's tea, and Nana says she also has a job, and she thinks Rulin told her to stay there and heal the injured people. But she says it's not that she doesn't want to do it, but she says she can. Very scared, saying that this is very shameful, and she says that she has been practicing her healing powers, but she is always afraid to use it when she really needs it, and says that if she were as strong as Roshnoi. The girl herself says that it looks like someone is coming, but it's not Anna, and a soldier arrives saying for Miss Pinheiro to go with him, saying that there is someone in serious condition, and in the infirmary the man keeps screaming, saying that his eyes and face are hurting, and his friend asks the prince, save him, and the prince thinks that they are steam burns, and he wonders if something went wrong with the steam engine in the north inclined mine. Meanwhile, Nana comes to them and asks what the situation is, then she looks at the injured man and starts to get scared, so her father asks if she's okay, and she gathers courage and tells him to leave everything right, because she succeeds, and so closes the curtain, and the girl is left inside alone with him invoking her magic, and after a while with everything shining inside, her father starts asking if it's that healing ability that the prince spoke of, and says that it is his first time seeing it, saying that his daughter, it's incredible, and he says it's a miracle, because it's like he's never been hurt before, and he says that with Nana there, everyone will be able to be well during the demon months, and one of the soldiers says that it was Nana who helped him when he was injured, thanking the girl, but then Roland gets scared, telling the soldier that time she left the house in secret to save, so if he lets her father know she's screwed, and that makes the girl scared, while the father is left with doubt, and the man who was injured begins to wake up, and wonders if this is a dream, saying that he is sure he was injured, but the prince says it is not a dream, and he is alive, and he says that young lady saved him, and he says that she is a witch with powers of healing, and when he returns to the room, he meets Roshanal, and she asks him if he doesn't think that is being too impatient. He asks if she is talking about Nana, remembering when he told that man that she is a witch, and the man himself asked Roland if witches are demons, but then her father starts to freak out, asking what he's saying that his daughter has nothing to do with demons, and he says that she, who saved that guy's life, and asks him if he thinks a demon would help him, and at that he becomes a little fearful, but then he kneels down in front of her, apologizing and thanking her for saving his life, and at that the girl gets a little happy, and in that Roshanal says that the information that Nana is a witch is certainly will leak, and he is afraid that he will never be able to live like a normal person, and he says that there is no better time than now, and he says he wants Nana to use her ability before the months of wizard, and it is impossible to continue hiding her identity, and he says that with the village of the border being small and undeveloped, the church has little influence there, and does not reach, not even having a church there, and Roshanal questions whether that is part of his plan, and he says it is clear, because the snow covered the path to the fortress of great music. Then he says that the ports are under his control, and they will not be able to receive news from Vila de Frontera, and he says he has at least 3 months to end the distorted vision. solution. That witches are more, and he asks her to think about it, talking about the miners saving by border town, and he says that not only will they not be afraid of witches, but they will also see Nana as angel of life, and he says that as long as they don't die right away, Nana will guarantee them a life new, and he says that this will greatly increase the morale of the troops, and he says that even though he hopes that some will not change their way of thinking, he at least wants to plant the seed of a new perspective of this new troop, and Rational wonders if it can really be done, and he says that without taking this step he will never know the answer, and she asks him why he wants to do this for the witches. And he asks if he hasn't told him before, saying that the village of Frontier doesn't care how they were born, but he wishes that one day even witches could live as a free person in his territory, and in this Rational opens his eyes to his speech, and apologizes for the lies she told before, and he is surprised by that, and she says that the sisters of the Witches Guild were left wandering for a long time, and they never asked much, just a safe place to stay, even if it's a castle like that, and he wonders if this is not the same as being locked in a cell, but only then does he realize that Rational is wanting take them there, and she doesn't deny it, but says that by doing so he would become an enemy of Church, but he says that even if they know they are thousands of kilometers away, and it's impossible for them to get through all of Grey Castle to Livonia, and he says that would provoke the royal family, and he says that they need to start at the border village and gather enough forces to counterattack the Church, so he says that after that he will create a world where witches and common people can live together, involving Grey Castle and perhaps the entire world. With that, at the Grey Castle residence, some knights begin to return home, and one of them celebrates that he has finally returned, and in that a signal is emitted, and he says that the time has come, and they go to the city, and that is Gerald Wimbledon, the first prince of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, and with that the doors lower for them to enter, and when he enters he says he is there to take back what is his, speaking to his father, and in this one of the vassals says that your Majesty was waiting for his return, and he says that the man did well to ask his guards that they changed the lathe, and he says that there was a problem with the plan, saying that because of the personal inequality, he only had time to change the king's guards, and the prince orders. He forgets, saying that he only needs 2 guards for him to follow, and he says that the rest will guard the door and keep any intruders out, and then the man agrees to this, saying that he will not. There will be no one to stop him, after all he is the first in line to become the king of Grey Castle, and also says that the star of the apocalypse, which represents the succession of his Majesty, is diverging from the sun, and he says it will be completely off course in less than 4 months, but while he keeps on with that damn talk, the first prince is no good attention, remembering the past with his brothers, then he says he understands, saying that it means that he will fight against the king's rules and will ascend to the throne, and in that he goes to the hall of his father, and wonders why there is a smell of blood there, and the man says that the king called a maid knight and she saw them changing the guards, but he tells the prince to stay calm, because they already took care of her, but the first prince becomes suspicious of this story about his father being calling another woman, because he hasn't touched a woman since his mother died, and as soon as he walks past the guards he thinks it's too quiet, and the man asks if that's not a thing, that he is saying that there doesn't seem to be many guards there, and he will be able to walk around easily, so the first one says that he never needed to come there on the sly or anything like that, and says that it was so far uninvited to discuss the inheritance of the throne with his father, but if he cannot convince him, he will have to choose a different way of doing things, drawing his sword, but when he leaning against the door he smells a very strong smell of blood, so he looks through the crack seeing blood inside and opens the door with a single kick and sees his brother there, asking what Timothy did with his body on the bed, and Timothy says that just like him, he also didn't want to do it that way, and he realizes that it was all a trap by Timothy, and he says that the battle for the throne is just a game, and he never planned to play by the rules, and his third sister never planned to play fair, and of course, he was also a sign because he would come to the king's residence when he heard about the constellation of the sage Ansgar, and hearing about the sage he remembers that man who was with he, and he says he didn't lie to him, the star of the apocalypse is diverging from the sun. This means that the explorer deviated from the correct path, but he says that this can also mean that he passed away, and at that the first prince gets very angry, shouting at his brother, saying that he put faith in him and gave him the best territory, and to think that he would be the first to betray him, and says he's just a demon from hell, but Timothy asks if he really thinks so. This, telling his brother to suppose what would happen if he failed and convinced the king to pass it on to him. To the crown, asking if he would stop there, and tells him to stop lying to himself. And the first one asks if the reason for bringing him there was just to eliminate him, but Timothy says that it would not benefit him at all, and says that if his father waited 5 years, he fears that face his third sister's pirate armada, and says that to be honest, he is very impressed with her, as she foresaw all this before the battle for the crown began. And he says they got along really well when they were little, but he wonders why they are trying to kill one or the other for the throne at that moment. Mainly he wants to leave to the halfway up that stand. Then he says he's going to tell you now, saying he wants to ascend the throne, saying that unlike clear water, valence is not good for training soldiers, and says that it needs an army as strong as the third sisters, and only the king of Grey Crystal can achieve this. Timothy gets angry and asks how dare he, trying to attack him, but Timothy stands still. His soldiers end up stopping the first one's attack, and then one or another soldier comes up behind him and hits his potato, and Timothy tells Gerald that for leaving his territory and murdering the king, he will be brought to trial the next morning, and says that his head will be placed on the guillotine. Then he is caught by the soldiers, wondering what trial this would be, and why. He thinks he can put you on trial, and he says he's going to make everyone know about it, saying that Timothy's supporters will know how monstrous he is, but Timothy says he doesn't. Will do this, because the alchemists have a drug called forgotten speech, and he will not be able to make no sound after taking it, and he says he will return to Valencia that night and do preparations before the news about his father reaches the leg region, and he says he will be deeply saddened, and as second in line to the crown, he will fulfill his obligation and become the king. And Gerald gets really pissed off with his brother's little speech, and he says that if he wants blame anyone, he must blame the third sister, because if it weren't for her, he wouldn't need to do this. Then the memories he had of his brothers are all shattered, and Timothy sends that they take him. Then he says that he is a demon, saying that he will not let him have a death quickly, and that man who was with the first one starts asking if he should call Timothy king, and he says yes, because after he becomes the king of Grey Crystal, he will end up in his part of the agreement. But seeing how pitiful his brother was that day, he feels he must add some precautions to his agreement, ordering that man to take something, and he says that of course he often sees this kind of thing, and says he's smart and knows what he's doing, so he should just do that, because Timothy doesn't want to be betrayed. So a while later, looking at his father, he says it wasn't supposed to end like this, and he remembers when he told his father that Gerald has already returned, and he says that the first objective is to force him to concede the throne, and asks if he doesn't want to stop him, but at that his father simply starts laughing, lifting a knife and sticking it in his own chest. So Timothy asks what he is doing, but he simply falls down dead, and Timothy is left wondering who is behind this, asking how dare they disrupt the fight by the crown, and says he will make them suffer the consequences for bothering him. I'm sure this was the work of a witch. The guy was a bit strange, but what if he was already really weird? But I'll tell you, this plot of Timothy not being bad is really surprising. Meanwhile, in Border Town, Roland thinks it's been too quiet this week, and says that the Vapor Das Mina's engine was repaired and has not caused any problem since then. And he says there aren't that many demonic beasts near the wall, so the hunting team should be able to take care of them, and he says he can finally rest a little, and he says that the border village plan is complete, and now he just needs to establish the fair market. The empty wallet can be full again, and then someone knocks on the door, and he asks for the letter. Why did a slap in the face come so quickly? Then he talks to the prince saying that it is a emergency, saying that a large number of demonic beasts appeared on the village wall, and so they go there, and they see the beasts coming running, and Van Eyre is afraid and asking if they have to fight so many demonic beasts at once, and he thinks it was just the miner in that village when he was chosen for that team, and he thinks it was just for the eggs at lunch. But now he is face to face with those demonic beasts that are heading towards the wall, and a bison ends up hitting her, and he wonders what happened with that tremor. And when they look down, they notice that the cow has hit the wall, and while her corpse is near the wall, the wolves use that to try to climb, and the iron axe asks the squad of long weapons are placed, and in this when the beasts begin to jump over the wall, Van Eyre thinks who will have to use 4 sprouts, and then impales those monsters, but one of them remains alive, attacking the man he was killing, and the iron axe asks them to continue facing the enemy and not be distracted by the surroundings, and he takes the opportunity to fire a shot in the monster's head, and he says that he was already dead as soon as he was born, and asks everyone continue to guard their positions, but in doing so one of them is bitten, and to make matters worse, getting his intestines exposed, and they ask Van Air what they should do, but the boy is completely paralyzed by that, and Carter asks them not to despair, asking if they forgot what they did in training, and tell them to do it according to the procedure. But at this Van Air calms down, and asks them to take the man to the treatment center, and the rest of them must defend their positions, as there is a demonic beast in front of the wall. Ron thinks to himself that all the eggs he gave to the troops were not in vain, seriously read this. And not throwing a law, it is totally synonymous with the man maturing, and in that another man starts asking what that is, and everyone is surprised that when they look at an iron key it speaks. That maybe they have problems now, and Ron starts asking what that thing is, because if beasts, hybrids were studied by biologists, they would hardly be able to understand why that creature appears with something that came out of a horror movie, and in it a wolf with two heads falls from what starts to get closer, and the soldiers try to shoot arrows at it, but obviously the shell stops all them, and they tell the prince that arrows are useless against him, and that thing continues approaching, and the prince thinks it will be difficult, because with such a hard shell it is like a walking tank, and he says that even a good archer can't shoot an arrow into a tank, and then he asks everyone to pick up the flints, so they try to shoot the monster with that, and when they do that the bullets still don't have much effect, and it keeps coming, so he thinks the flints won't work, and he tells everyone to calm down and not to panic, and asks Vanir to take some people with him to the warehouse, and get the gunpowder, and he asks all the rest of him to listen, but then the noise starts happening, and they wonder what that was, and when they look the turtle stuck its head in the wall, and after hearing that sound they wonder what he is trying to do, and it starts to break she more and more, and in this Ronald thinks that this is bad, realizing that the wall cannot support so much pressure, but the pulling force is still weak, and he says that the wall's capacity to withstand a collision is basically zero, and if this continues he will enter, and in this he asks for everyone to retreat as the wall falls, and with the wall falling he is also from Vasco, but Roxino appears to save him, and then goes down with him to the ground, and she says she was worried, and saw how they were doing, and she asked him how he planned to deal with it, and says that there is already a huge hole in the wall, and if he doesn't act now that big guy will come in the village, then he says it's no problem, because his best weapon hasn't shown up yet, and so the boy brings the gunpowder, and the iron axe asks him to light it and put it under of his foot, and so Vanir thinks he knows all the steps and should stay calm, so he goes down from the foot of the iron, pulls the trigger and runs away, and he reports that the gunpowder has been lit, so everyone must go to the ground, and then the thing explodes underneath the monster, throwing it upwards, and they start celebrating that the demonic beast was killed by the explosion, and at that Roland asks how about it, and he says he had nothing to worry about, but Roxino asks him to wait, and they say that once again a large group is coming, and with the wall damaged they ask what are they going to do, and then the beasts really start to attack, and the soldiers need to stop them with shields, and they say it's impossible to stop them, and Roland thinks the wall is already the formation broke, so he asks why everything is going wrong, and at that the wild pig goes towards them, but then Anna arrives all polite and pompous, placing herself in front of the demon, and in that he involves a skewer staking it, and the pig automatically turns into bacon, and Roland thinks about that topic, but remembers that he didn't ask Anna to show up there, and he says that as his replacement to develop the industry, Anna can't waste time there, and he says he put her in the field hospital to keep her out of danger, but asks how she escaped. Then the soldier goes to Roland saying that Anna was worried with the formation of the wall and said he wanted to go there, and he said it was impossible for him stop her, and Roland thinks his initial plan was to make Nana make a good impression on the troop, and after most people accepted the witches, Anna's existence would become public, but now it's too late to say anything, so he asks the soldier not to worry with him and go protect Anna quickly, and so he goes, and in that Roxanol will also protect her, but asks him to stay safe, and so all the soldiers continue to tremble, but they order them to listen to his orders and protect Anna, and so she continues to invoke the flames, casting at the demons, and Roland wonders if this is a wall of flames, and they all start running from the girl's skills, and she looks at Roland and he understands quickly, and says that he knows he must take care of the rest, and so he takes the gun from Carter's hand, aiming at the demon and killing the first one, and in that all the soldiers are surprised by the prince's shooting, and he says that the hole in the wall has been repaired, so everyone must go to top of it, and the spearmen must reform, and archers must shoot at will, they must protect their wall and protect the border village, and everyone stays with the wall up there to kill the beasts, and after the last one is studded with flash he finally falls, and they begin to celebrate because they managed to defeat the demonic beasts, and soon they all thank to the prince, they say that they got it with the loose cans and gunpowder that he provided. They also managed to repel the enemy that was previously unimaginable, and he says that this is the result of everyone's cooperation, especially Anna's, and think he was so focused on commanding that he forgot about her, and asks how he will explain her existence to the troops, and he says that he has. Afraid that she will be seen as a demon again, and he asks everyone to stay still and not moving, but everyone is bowing to the girl, and Roland thinks that's how it is, because even if they say that her powers are scary, when those powers are fighting alongside them, fighting against the evil enemy, fear is lost and replaced by trust and gratitude. Then he asks if Anna is okay, and she says yes, but her face is pale and the girl ends up falling in his arms, and he is quite frightened by the situation. And so in Garcia's palace, she receives the news that her father is dead, and they wonder how this happened. And she says that on the surface it looks like her brother Gerald murdered her father, and then he was scared by the guards, and she says that he did not commit high crimes, so he was put on trial and sentenced to the guillotine. And his knight speaks that this is not normal, and she says that of course it is not normal, and even if her brother is stupid, and he is not at the level, he would choose the path to death. And she says that if someone giving orders he would never do something like that, and says that he was obviously tricked. And she says that besides his second brother timid, who else would do something like that, and says that even an idiot will know later of this event, and he would be the one with the most power. And she says that depending on the favoritism of his brother he didn't need to do that, so he asks why he needed to do something like that. And she says it's because Timid is afraid of her, and says he's afraid of the Black Army. But she says that this was a very direct step, and even if he blamed the murder of the king and Gerald, will only deceive the inhabitants of Grey Castle. And she says that he wants to have authority of Grey Castle in hand, so she estimates that this will take quite a while. And she says she's going to have to make a small change in plans, and says that after he becomes king the first thing he will do is deal with her. Then they will set sail on the day today, and her knight starts asking her what she wants, and she says that if Timid doesn't want to wait for 5 years, she won't disappoint you. But she says she herself said that Wimbledon died recently and they are still in mourning, but she asks what that has to do with it, asking if he needs to cry, and he says he doesn't need to, and she tells him to go gather the captains of the Black Armada, and he complies with her order calling her Your Majesty, but says, in reality, Your Majesty the Queen. And then back to the border village, they say that great groups of immune beasts were no longer sighted, and the wounded soldiers have already returned for the teams, and they say that the enthusiasm to fight is high. And in this the prince speaks that Carter used the demonic hybrid shell to become part of the morale in the destroyed place, and he says that defeating a large group of demonic beasts brought him a lot of pride, and there is no doubt who contributed the most. It was her. And he says that even if it's been a week, she hasn't woken up yet. And then he asks Ruxol if it would be today, and she says it is today, at midnight, and he asks if she will become an adult in a coma, but Ruxol says no, and says that she will die in a coma, and she says that the pain of the transition to adulthood can only be confused by one's own will, and being unable to resist the demons will only make her die. Then she says that during the years she was homeless, she saw several deaths, and witches were treated like animals, pigged, burned to death or tortured slowly for the entertainment of the nobles, and witches who were lucky escaped and could only live isolated from people. And she says that without knowing where the sacred mountain is, getting there is just an unattainable hope in their hearts. But she says that Anna is different, and besides the sisters of the association, she has never seen anyone be so kind to witches. She says that the girl is needed by people care about her and treat her like a normal person, and she tells the prince that Anna hasn't become an adult yet, but she has already found the sacred mountain itself. And Roland remembers when the girl gave the first demonstration magic to him and questioned if he was going to kill her, and he also remembers when she said that I wanted to stay by her side, saying that the devil's bite cannot kill her, with her saying that we'll defeat her. Then he also remembers when she said she wasn't going anywhere and would remain by his side, so he says he will be with her until the end. And Ruxol thanks him, because at night she notices when her process is starting, and she says that Anna's magic is starting to wake up, and with that all the candles start to move. He asks if that is the devil bite, saying that it doesn't seem like anything has changed in Anna, and so the candle goes out and everyone, they are scared to death. But when it lights up with greenish tones, and they wonder what's going on. And Anna finally opens her eyes, and Roland goes over to her full of fear, asking if it hurts anywhere, asking to see the wounds, asking if he can be internal bleeding, also asking if she can speak, and remembers who he is. Ruxol remembers that she just woke up, asking him to calm down, and at that he apologizes, and the girl just reaches out to him, but then she summons a fireball from that green coloring, and everyone is surprised by this, and the girl shows that she knows what she is doing. And Roland, even though he is afraid, brings his finger closer, and she extends the flame to him, placing his hand in the fire. A while after seeing as Anistar, Rational resigns and Roland asks if she is, saying that she wants to leave and if she will return to the association, then she says yes, because as he can see, Anna woke up and survived the torture of the demon's bite, and even the reason not being clear, Rational says that she is the first witch to be well after of the day of awakening, and she says that even a Roland saw the changes in her flame. This is probably a new extension of the girl's ability, and those green flames followed her wish. They can be kept at a temperature similar to body temperature, and yet they can increase in an instant, and she also says that the flames can be calls to move slowly within a radius of 5 meters. Rational says that the design Anna's magical power is extremely high, so it should have a great effect on her, but she keeps wondering what prevented Anna from suffering when she became an adult. So Roland guesses that what happened was that during the battle at the Great Wall, Anna created a large amount of flames using all her magical power, and this reduced the effects, and a witch is a convergence of magical powers, so it must be difficult to contain all that power, and he explains that in that era, they are repressed by most of the people, that they can only live by hiding in their abilities and pretending to be a person normal, so the witches who died during the transition to adulthood in the past, most likely they were unable to release the magical energy resulting in the breakage of the container. Then Rational says that this is very likely, and she needs to tell everything this to the sisters of the association as soon as possible, so she says that during that winter, many will suffer the same hardship, but if they manage to survive, she will bring them all there, and hopes that Roland can accept them too, so, like he did with Anna, and he says that even though he's happy that she thinks that way, he won't. It will be late but if she goes after the same devil, and also says that the climate there outside is bad, and there are demonic beasts saying it's not safe for her, but Rational says that if he can pass on the information sooner, maybe fewer people will die, so she also tells him not to worry, as demonic beasts normally cannot find her, and in that he asks about the day of her awakening, and she says that it happens close of the end of winter and the beginning of spring, but she tells him not to worry about her, because the suffering has become less in recent years, so he says he understands, asking for her to be careful on the way, and so Rational bids him farewell, quickly disappearing, and he thinks she's always so mysterious, and then he sits back down, saying that if your guess is right, then the effect it will have on the witches will be huge, and Nana may end up feeling the same suffering in the future, so he can't let her stay sitting without doing anything, and he says that in addition, there is the problem of accommodation for the witches of the association, and the production of the steam engine number 2, outside the system of exchanges from the border village in the spring. While he is full of worry, a Barrow coming into the room talking to him, saying that the Fortress of Great Music sent a messenger with a letter, then he will find that same messenger before, then he realizes that the messenger from the Honeysuckle family told him that he came to discuss trade with the aristocrats of the Fortress of Great Music, and for him to have a face like that, the negotiation must have failed, but when he reads the letter he wonders what is happening, and notices that the king is dead, so the boy talks to him, saying that, on behalf of Doc Ryan, he delivers that message and says that the battle for the crown is over, and after he receives the will he must return to the king's residence, and he speaks that the new king of Grey Castle, who would be Timothy Wimbledon, according to the situation in next 6 months he will be officially crowned. Then the Baron V asks the prince to contain his pain, saying that the culprit is the first prince and saying that it is all a tragedy. Then he puts it on his face what he is planning to do now. Then Roland says that death Gerald's was very strange, so he wants to wait and see what the third and fifth will, and he says that even though he doesn't know much about Garshin Wimbledon, he knows that she is not the kind of person who would let others walk all over her, so she won't be going back to Grey Castle easily, and he just needs to follow whatever she does, and he says that because of the change of power, Grey Castle may become unstable and the first thing to do is to ensure the escape of your family members. Then he tells him and Carter and the subordinates that they must write a family tree, and he will send the guards to Grey Castle to fetch them to take refuge in other villages, so the Baron thanks him for his concern, and he says that in addition they will stop to export iron and will only sell raw gemstones to the village of Salguero, and he says he needs of iron for other future projects, and also talks about recruitment orders for increase the size of the militia, as well as training regulations, and he begins to thinking about the message the messenger brought to him that time, wondering if it is bad, and he says it's hard to choose between the two, but he says it's a big mistake, and he says that while he stays quiet in the border village, there will definitely be people showing up, like Duke Ryan of Fortress of Great Music, and he says that after the months of the devil pass 8 or 9 out of 10, he will raise the banner of the new king and march west, and he says that this is exactly what he needs. With industrialization what he lacks is labor, because the border village only has around 2,000 inhabitants, so several projects cannot be expanded, and he thinks about buy slaves, recruit talented people, increase birth rate, forced marriage. But he says that all of this is unfeasible. On the other hand, if he takes the fortress of great music, he can take a large number of free people and at the same time gain riches, and he wonders, then annexing the population, and what other way would be easier to gain wealth than by plundering. So he thinks they are waste, saying that he hopes Rational can bring the witches as soon as possible to help him, and so on the impassive ridge in the valley, Rational reaches his friends, and when she was stuck entering a cave, several vines start going to her, so she tells Folha that she's back, and so the girl is happy about it, but then Rational sees the ties on the girl's arm, and notices that two sisters are gone, and she says that Eri and Abi, they are not managed to survive the passage of adulthood 5 days ago, but she ends up saying that I know something, which happens quite often, so she asks her not to talk about it, and tells her to come in fast, because Andy talked about her for a long time. Then Andy, seeing that Rational arrived, starts calling her Veronica's girl, so Rational asks how many times she has to say that, saying that she doesn't. It's more like that weak little girl, and now she's a strong witch, asking her not to call her anymore. So, and Rational says that Veronica no longer exists, but Andy says that she will always be her, and getting rid of your nightmares doesn't mean you should give up on your past, but still, she tries to be understanding and understand her, and she goes back to calling Rational, and says that always waited for her to come back, and the journey must have been difficult, and so she hugs Andy. Then she asks what happened to the girl named Anna, asking if she couldn't save her, but Rational says no, and she didn't need to be saved. In fact, she is capable of saving everyone. So when she tells everyone, she says that the man there is called Roland Vimland, the fourth prince of Grey Castle, and he is willing to welcome them all, saying that he too promised that one day all witches will be able to live with a free person in their territory. Then Andy asks if he really said that, and she says yes. Before she got there he already had accepted Anna and Nana, and she says that the prince never said that a witch's powers came of the demons, and he said that they are his own powers, but everyone is in disbelief. But then she talks to Andy, saying that she knows about his powers, that besides seeing the power of the flow of magic, she knows if the person is lying or not, and she says that the prince saying he will protect the witches and becoming an enemy of the church is all true, and she also says that he was the one who invented it, a steam engine, and he and Anna who worked hard to build it. He really wants to help the witches, but then one of them shouts for Rational to stop, and Rational calls her a respectable mentor, and that woman says she heard the girl's story, asking if she is saying it is wrong. They search for the holy mountain, and meanwhile in another corner, Timothy asks if the church confirmed, and his servant says that the church confirmed that the stone was not changed nor lost its effects. The retaliation stone of the gods and the king is of the best quality and is without a doubt the weapon more effective against demons, and if this could fail then the church would have lost to the witches. Timothy says that this doesn't mean there weren't witches involved, so he says his father had no reason to commit the S, and he says that this is very out of the ordinary, and nothing is more abnormal than these demons, and he sends his servant to continue searching for witches, searching thoroughly, in and around the city, and so he takes that stone of retaliation. Looking at her, meanwhile Rational wakes up, tied to a log without knowing what happened. When she remembers what Samet was talking about, disbelieving a prince showing sympathy with witches, so she says this is a very funny joke, and asks her sisters if recognized how those people treated them, and she says they pretended it was in the name of God to use swords and whips against them, and without the stone of retaliation of the gods what else? They can use it to step on witches, so she says they were deceived. The suffering in passage into adulthood is a test from God for your body and mind, and only those with strong determination can become really strong. Only these people can search for the sacred mountain. But Rational keeps wondering if suffering is really a test, and the table keeps talking on the day of awakening, saying that the sisters who do not succeed are things that do not deserve to be mentioned, and Rational wonders what the difference is between this and the church. Then the teacher starts talking to Rational, saying that there is still time to go back, saying that if she forgets these stories, she can forgive her mistakes and go back, and allow her to re-enter the association. But Rational says that if that is the case, she will leave with the sisters who want to go with her, and for those who chose to stay, that she wishes good luck. But when she turns her back, she is attacked by the snake's magic. Then the snake catches her foot, and so her master puts her to sleep, and already in the present, she asks what she thought of the poison, and says that to be honest she had big expectations on Rational, but says the girl failed. Then she asks if she was hiding a stone tone of retaliation from the gods, asking if she knows what she is doing, and she says it is just a tool occasionally used to punish disobedient children, and she says that Rational is a person who needs to be punished, and when Wendy saved her from the aristocracy, she thought that she would side with the association, but the teacher says that she ended up selling her sisters for the noble to have their old position back, but Rational says that all he did was for her sisters, and hopes that they will not have to suffer on the day of awakening, and hopes that they can live where they have food to eat and clothes to wear, and Rational says that they don't intends to stop her plans, but the sisters should have the right to choose how they want to live. Then she says that the border village is going through several changes, and the master asks if she is talking about that drawing she had with her, and says that even though he doesn't understand what is drawn, she questions whether Rational thinks a pile of cold iron can come to life with a creature, and she asks Rational if she thinks they are 3 years old playing the drawing in the fire. Then she says that her patience is running out and she will give one last chance to girl, saying that if she pleads guilty in front of all her sisters and acknowledges that she was deceived by mortals, she can spare her life, and if she doesn't, she'll stick that rod in hot iron in her heart and nail her lifeless body to a stake to teach a lesson to everyone, and she tells Rational not to miss her last chance to be forgiven, telling her, say her choice, but Rational thinks that she will not admit any injustice, that she is no longer a weak one, but a powerful brat. She is not to weaken against death, and in this she accepts her destiny, but someone asks the mentor to wait, and Wendy talks to her, telling her to look at the piece with a white cloth tied around everyone's arm, saying that they have already experienced several losses, and asks if the mentor wants to increase one more piece. Then the mentor asks if Wendy was deceived by her, telling her to wake up, saying that they are just lies, and Wendy says that she doesn't know if that's right, but she doesn't plan on going to the border village. However, she thinks that what Rational said, that's right, they should be able to choose how they want to live, and she says she would like to know if someone wants to go with her. Knowing that no one has answered, she says it's okay to let them. Rational leaves alone, and she says that Rational did not hurt the cooperative association, so Wendy can't stand by and watch her kill her, and the others start to agree, saying that since she wants to go back, she must let the girl go, saying that the church, the illness and the pain have already taken away so many sisters, so they ask the mentor to rethink, and she tells everyone to be silent, saying that if she lets her go like that, what will they do when a second or third Rational appear, and she also asks what will happen if she sells the camp to the church, and says that they would have nowhere to escape, and so she tries to kill the girl, but Wendy quickly stops her with her magic, and before the mentor realized it, she took something golden in her hand and threw it towards Rational, breaking the retaliation stone that was in the girl, and so the mentor gets very angry, calling her a traitor, and casting her copper magic on the girl, and Wendy, unable to do much, has her arm bitten by the snake, and so the mentor tells Rational not to even think about running away, but the girl disappears from her sight, and she doesn't have much to do. To do so, he makes an explosion of his power around his body, but it is too late, as Rational manages to pierce her with that hot iron, and appears next to Wendy helping her, and the mentor falls into the floor with that iron stuck in her body, and they all start calling Rational a traitor, ordering him to kill, but Rational disappears in front of them, and far away, she tells Wendy it seems that they haven't reached them yet, but she says that what is most urgent is the poison of the snake's face, and she says that the venom is spreading, and if it continues like this, Wendy will die, and she thinks she can't just wait around, so she stops Wendy near a rock, lifts the girl's sleeve and takes his dagger, promising Wendy that she will be fine, and after doing what she should, she says that for now it will have to be like this, and says that counting on that, she manages to reach the border village, Nana will be able to heal her, and she quickly takes advantage to wrap the girl's arm that was cut, but she wonders if she'll make it live in that state, saying that it took 3 days to get there, and carries a person. It will take even longer, and she says that Wendy's wound is still bleeding, and if this continues, so it won't last more than 3 or 4 days. When out of nowhere she feels a presence and asks, who is there, and a girl appears in the sky asking if she needs help. Then that blonde girl who was flying tells her not to worry because she doesn't want to fight, and then Rational asks who she is, and she says she is Lightning, who joined the cooperative association not long ago, and she's always been away, so it's normal that she doesn't know you, and Rational asks if the guy sent her there, but she says no, and says she just wants to meet them, and Lightning says that she said they should choose how they want to live, so she simply chose him. Follow, and the girl says it's because of that black steam machine she told her about, and that gray powder that turns to stone when mixed with water. It's that thing that makes a loud sound. And she says that wants to live, and the girl says she is determined to become an adventurer, and of course she wants to go to interesting places, and so Roshnol asks if she really wants to become an adventurer, and asks why she joined the cooperative association, and the girl asks if she should look for through the sacred mountain is not a great adventure. However, the guy does not have the mentality of a adventurer, and Lightning says that she is only focused on what is written in your ancients, that it is impossible for her to find the sacred mountain like this, and she even says that her father said no. This is what an adventurer should be doing, but Roshnol gets straight to the point, asking if her ability is to fly, and the girl says yes, saying that even with the two of them, she can move like the wind, but she realizes that things are not really like that, and realizes that they are quite heavy, so she thinks that probably maybe she can't move like the wind with the two of them, and she says that with them as people they can return to the border village in less than 2 days, but Roshnol says that Wendy needs to go as quickly as possible, and Lightning notices that she appears very close to Wendy, and at the camp. She called her Veronica, asking if that is Roshnol's name, and she asks if they know each other a long time ago, and Roshnol says yes, saying that before she joined the cooperative association, she was manipulated with a puppet, and it was Wendy who he found, and she says that her house, it was in the city of Silver, and before she turned 14, her parents appeared at a demonstration, and she and her brother were taken in by her uncle, and it was in that year also that she awakened her powers, but unfortunately he found out about her powers and took her brother from her, locking him up and started training her, and she threatened Roshnol, saying that if she wants her brother to live, she better use her powers to work, so she says he taught her how to sabotage, poisoning and murdering. The Gilliam family business was expanding, and their tasks were getting more and more soybeans, which the ironic thing is that their skills seemed to be made for this kind of work, and when she met Reed again, he was like a complete stranger to her, and her brother said he wished she was never his sister, saying that witches deserve to go to hell and make friends with the devil, and she says that after that she was like a zombie, and then, becoming an adult, even the iron bars could not stop her, and she says that she killed her uncle and escaped from prison, but didn't know where to go, and at that time she ended up meeting Wendy, and to his broken heart, her smile was like a flame that was lit again. That she explains that Wendy took her to her session, and Roshnol says that was where she learned that there were several like them who did not stop resisting, and then the guy tells they that now is not the time for tackiness, and they need to find the sacred mountain, but Roshnol says that face, she thinks she is incapable of guiding the witches to freedom and safety, and Lightning says that man, she's already gone crazy, and what's sad is that no one in the association believed her, and no one would believe the prince who cares about witches, and Roshnol starts to think about Roland, but Lightning says he believes in him. Meanwhile in the border village, Anna is talking to Roland, asking if he is okay, and he wonders why he is sneezing so much that day, wondering if someone is thinking about him, and while they talk they hear a noise, and soon Lightning strikes near them, and Anna starts to defend herself, but he ends up seeing that there is Roshnol, and she herself asks to. Roland calls Nana there quickly, as she has an injury. Then Roland starts asking how things got like this, wondering if the witch camp was attacked by demonic beasts, and asks if only the 3 of them managed to escape, but he says that luckily, Nana is there, so that witch's life can be saved and the arm can be recovered, and with that Lightning leaves there, and he says that she was the one who came with Roshnol asking if she didn't is injured, and she says she's fine, telling him not to worry, that the others are too here, and she says he is like Roshnol told them, a prince who cares about witches, and it's a pity that after hearing this, most of the witches in the association didn't believe Roshnol, but she says that just like her father said, such a big world has all kinds of people, and he realizes that in fact her father wanted to say that he was going to find a stranger like him, but then he notices that in fact the association was not attacked by demonic beasts, and the Lightning asks why he thought of that, and he says that no one explained anything, and Lightning says that the one with the injured arm is called Wendy, and she was injured by Kara, the mentor of the association, and he asks why she was hurt by her own ally and how it happened, and after finding out, he returns to his quarters, and as Roshnol lies on his bed he asks what she is doing, and soon thinks that the situation would be that, but she starts walking in the direction him, and he starts to get nervous, saying that she must be tired, because Lightning told him what happened and she can rest a little more, and then she comes very close to him, kneeling down to Wendy, saying that she, Veronica, also known as Roshnol, swears to him that while he is kind to witches, she will be at his disposal, either as a shield against demons, and he takes his sharp dagger during the night, and she says that she will be at his disposal without no fear or regret until the end of her life, and he soon realizes how she will act. because disappointed with the association, she wants to put the witch's hopes on him, so he says that even though they want to work together for jobs, he doubts that she will be able to understand meaning of freedom and equality now. So he takes her dagger and says he accepts her loyalty, remembering that she says her name is Veronica and asks if that's her old name, and she says that yes, and he says he has no intention of hiding it, saying that Veronica is already in the past, saying that she is serving to the fullest, he is now rational, and in that a while later, Wendy receives a contract, and he says yes, because she saved Rational, so it's impossible that dude accept her into the association again, then ask her why she doesn't stay in the village and work to him, and he says that if she accepts she must sign the contract, and says that her payment will be the same year, 1 gold coin per month, and also says that he does not want to discuss this in a hurry, but for some reasons, it gets more dangerous with each passing day, and he also tells her that he thinks who found a way that allows a witch not to suffer on the day of awakening, and in this the two are more weight, and some time later he says that even though it is just speculation without any evidence, he thinks that as the host of magical power, it will continue to be accumulated from the last witch. As they grow, and when this reaches a level higher than the body can support, the witch will suffer, and a witch is more powerful than the months of the devil, and he says that during the time of Anna in the castle, she was training her powers every day, and before she became an adoptee, she even fell into a coma when using all her magical power. He says that she was able to get through the moments more difficult than a witch without any injuries, so he thinks this is the key to solving the devil's bite. And Roshnov says that if they be able to release their magical power without stopping and keep it at a safe level, then the suffering on the day of awakening can be reduced or even completely eliminated, and he says that as Lord of Border Town, he can provide a place so that witches can freely release their powers, and that way no one will imprison them, put them on trial or kill them on the spot, and he says that if his guess is right then the village of Border is the sacred mountain they are looking for, and in it Wendy speaks to him, saying, who have already signed a contract and agreed to work for him in Villa de Frontera. What would be the first thing they should do, and he says that the first thing to do is repeatedly train the powers until you control them, completely like Anna, and to begin with, he asks each of them to demonstrate their own skills, so he asks them to first. Lightning shows her maximum speed, and the girl is very happy showing her power, and Anna says that luckily they had lightning with her flying ability to bring Wendy to time for the border village, and in that Anna says she is right, saying that the girl doesn't even look like so different from her, but she is very brave, and says that Wendy's skill is manipulation of the wind, and it is also quite powerful, and Anna is happy about it, because in the blink of an eye, they gathered more people of their kind thanks to the prince, but Nana warns Anna asking if she also feels that the nightingale is a little strange, and she asks if he is talking about her clothes, but she says it's not the clothes. She asks if Anna didn't notice the tone she speaks with Prince, and the way he looks at him has changed a little, and Anna even looks and asks if it really is, and Nana realizes that the girl is kind of dense, so she says that when the right time comes, Anna must not say that she did not warn, and as she says this, they begin to hear an alarm, and they notice that the sign is of the attack of the demonic beast, and in that they all go to Moral, and when the prince reaches the top of it, he asks what is happening, as there is no sign of a large-scale attack that questions whether it was just a false alarm, and he asks the axe of irons if it was he who sounded the alarm, and he says yes, telling the prince that that creature came. Then the prince asks what creature it would be, and he says it is a hybrid demonic creature that he almost killed a few years ago, and the prince is surprised by this, and he thinks that in theory, demonic beasts are similar to beasts that do not have the ability to think. They should all have had a concept of retreat, and they should all have died in an attack by Fortress of Great Music, but in recent years the fortress has never been broken, and yet, she is alive and has also lived for all that time, and the prince thinks he has always had this strange sensation, and in that the beast appears, and the iron axe tells everyone that the priority is to protect the prince, and so that winged lion begins to get quite close to the wall, but then he stops and looks to the side, and Carter asks what's going on. After all, he stopped, and the lion, after thinking for a while, takes a leap, almost flying, and with that the prince asks everyone, shoot quickly, but even so there is no time, and the lion jumps on top of the wall, and the prince says that the strange feeling became reality. That creature is able to determine your points, weak and strong, and he chose to attack the weak points. And it is a clear sign that he is intelligent, and in that the iron axe says that that damn thing is flying towards the residential area, and in that he asks the second team to follow him, and he also talks to the recomposition team, ordering him to climb and defend the wall temporarily, and while the prince runs, To stop the beast's invasion, he thinks he didn't think that just by watching, the demonic beast will see through his attack and defense, and he assumes that he greatly underestimated him, thinking that they were just wild animals, and in that he chose the noises and ran to her, and when he got there one of the guards say that this is their neighbor's brother-in-law, and the demonic beast ate him, so they think that the damned man escaped, and in that the prince looks at the ground with that blood mark, and he is stunned by the scene, but one of the guards shouts, telling him to look to the right, and so, that beast attacks again, jumping on top of one of the men, and the prince asks the soldiers, "Be careful," as the beast screams at them all, and Carter says again that this is bad, and cannot shoot in that case, and in that the iron axe asks them to do as he says, and he asks everyone to go up on the roof, and be careful not to hit innocent people, and in that they begin to climb the houses, surrounding that beast, but it opens its wings, producing quite strong winds. And then they start taking off the beast's head, and Roland looks at one of the men on the roof, and the beast also looks at him, but when it gets distracted by that man, the iron axe jumps in her head, wondering if that monster still remembers him. Meanwhile on the line, defense of Hermes in the north, ask them to maintain their positions, not letting in a demonic beast in the city, but one of them that was climbing the wall manages to reach the top, breaking part of it and vomiting several other small ones that were in its belly. Then they think it's over, and quickly decide to retreat, and then lower the bridge so they can get in and stay protected by the moat, so they say they lost the entire outside part of the city. But the cathedral is more important, but she wonders if with few other people there they will be able to hold them back. But then the demonic beasts continue to advance, and one of them winged gets very close to them, as do others running, and that guard tells everyone to take their pills. They must be ready to fight the enemy, and when they take it, they succeed. Enough powers, almost being in the berserker state, so they scream that they are doing all this for Hermes and the new holy city, but while they were stuck fighting, the bridge low, and they are ordered to retreat, for the army of divine punishment has arrived, and so several knights in very brave armor arrive to fight, and she wonders what the army is of divine punishment, and says that no matter how strong they are, as long as they are human, they won't be able to defeat demonic hybrids, and while she thinks one of the hybrids actually will, defeating the first knight, he stops the beast's attack with his own hand, and another kills he with a spear, and that woman thinks that was too fast, thinking that his power doesn't loses out to the demonic hybrid at all, so one of them becomes quite badass, and in the tower of cathedral, some people observe from afar, with binoculars, everything that is happening, and one of the three bishops say that it seems like they won, but he says it was worth it, his victory was expected victory, and says that the most important thing is that the reinforcements of the four kingdoms were already there, and in that the bishop Heder says he is right, and says it was necessary to sacrifice an army of almost 100,000 soldiers, and says that with this, the border defenses of the four kingdoms are useless now, saying that this is really sensational, but the other says that to achieve this they used many pills, and lost even more soldiers than the army of judgment, and these are things crucial to the church, but the crown says there was no other choice, and the wild beasts already appeared, and as it is in the holy book they don't have much time left, and if they couldn't unify the continent and gather all the power, then only destruction awaits, and they continue to argue, but Heder says he doesn't need to worry about that, and asks if he thinks God does to live, and asks how he is sure that the old man no longer likes the demons, and in that, Maney thinks she agrees, because God does not bless that world, and he does not only love demons, he loves those who win, and some time later, in Rune's moral, he tells everyone there that with regret, they will mourn for the man in the second division, and say that he made a sacrifice, heroic during his battle against the demonic beast, and it was his courage that protected the border village, and that protected everyone's home there, and they will forever remember his sacrifice to protect his family and innocent people, so he hopes that he not be without peace, and in that Carter talks about the way he is acting, so Roland asks if it is inappropriate, and he says no, he can't say that exactly, but he feels like no one ever treated recruits like Roland is treating them. He says they are not even nobility, they have no history, familiar, and not even surnames or first names, but then Roland says that this doesn't sound bad, and says that the border village has never had a funeral before, and he says that these events are only made by nobles and aristocrats, but death is no stranger to them. The months of the devil take many lives every year, and he says that those who survive cannot cope in any way normal with the casualties, and they just go to the forest and dig a hole to bury the dead, and he says that holding a funeral for the soldiers who died is not only to remember them, but also to strengthen the hearts of the soldiers who remained, and he says that when people begin to ask who and what they are fighting for, there will be unimaginable changes, and he says that there is no kind of mentality that is created out of thin air, and as long as they continue with this mindset daily and ensure their management, eventually they will see results, but he thinks that if he wants the border village to stay on the right track, he needs to work a little harder, and if he can produce artillery, then the sacrifices made by the army can decrease, and in that some men see a woman near the prince and ask if she is the dead man's wife, and they say it's very sad because she's also taking care of 2 small children, and he wonders how they will survive, and the other keeps the question if he didn't know, saying that the prince is committed to the promise he made at recruitment, saying that Ali's wife will not only receive his salary, but also receive compensation additional, and he says he thinks this is called a pension, and he says it's true, because the chief knight handed her a bag with the money, and he also heard tell them that they will receive food and coal every month, and they have nothing to worry about, and he says that the prince is certainly kind, and he's even a little jealous of Ali now. While they are talking, Vanir feels a vibration on the ground, and when he looks to the side, he's still a little scared, but he says it's nothing, saying he must have heard things, and says he thought there was someone there, and meanwhile the prince talks to Anna, asking how the Perdonera's pipes are, asking if it was a success, and she says that with the steam trampoline work, she can give tasks to the blacksmith masters now. And he says that in that field they have more experience than her, but she says that every time lightning comes to sea, she gets very agitated, and says that the masters don't even have time to answer her questions, and he thinks that's why he hasn't seen her recently, saying that she went there to see, and he tells Anna that the reason he called her there was to help her build it, and Carter asks what it is, and she says it looks like a gun, wider, and he says it's not much different from that, saying he tried to draw the plan of a 12-pounder cannon, and says that this was the best he could get for cannons used in battle. That he says that even though he initially put 12-pound iron balls to calculate the diameter of the drum, he had to use his hand for measurements, since they don't have equipment. Then he says that if they were not dissatisfied with the result of the shooting, they will need to make some adjustments, and in this he talks to Anna, saying that he needs her, wanted the walls of those 2 holes, and also says that afterwards she must melt the bars of steel and put it inside those holes, and then she says she's going to try, and so she heats the mold of the cannonball, also melting the bar, but Roland asks her to try not to look at the steel. Then it is very clear, and in this the girl begins to do the process with her eyes closed, and the heart of Roland hesitates slightly, and seeing that she is starting to sweat, he grabs his towel and goes dry it, and Carter says that it looks like your highness has something clearer than molten steel, and he says she was great, asking her to stop there, saying he's going to dinner, and will ask the cook to prepare the meat with pepper as a prize. While they are at it, a spy is watching everything, saying it's unbelievable, and thinking he should pass this on information to Timothy as soon as possible, and says that the 4th prince of Grey Castle was making a witch in public, and in that same man passes by the soldiers, and says that that bunch of idiots don't understand, in winter they are running in circles, and wonder if they don't know how to preserve energy, saying that when the demonic beasts enter the village, they won't have time to run, and he says that the strange things in that village won't either. Has an end, a wall being built from scratch in one night, and a metal rod that releases a strange sound and can defeat demonic beasts, and the most terrifying thing is that the 4th prince was wasting time with a witch, and he says that his soul must have been replaced by demons, and he says that if Timothy didn't offer such a high prize, he wouldn't want to be in a village like that being influenced by demons, and he says the good thing is that there aren't any information that he can't get, and he thinks that as long as he gets it to Timothy, he will earn a great reward, but at that Van Eyre tells him to stay still, saying that is a spy, ordering them not to let him escape, and in that he asks how they found out, and thinks that everyone there is a demon, saying that the 4th prince used the power of demons, and while this Barav is taking care of the prince's expediency, and says that he is really too much to do to him 2 sailing boats, and saying that he doesn't need captains, or helmsmen and sailors, and says that without those people, who will take those boats out of there, and he says that even though he is in charge of the administration of the legal work of the border village, and even having already had a taste of power, the prince's orders are very rational, and he says it would be great if he were a little more normal, but then they call Barav, and tell him that another mouse was caught, and then he asks if they got any information from him. He says his name is Marmota, he is a spy, sent by the 2nd prince, and says that he killed a resident of the border village, and pretended to be a resident using a false identification. He lived there for several months, and he also speaks that they found with him a bag of cement, as well as a bunch of money and a letter, and he says to Barov, who are still interrogating him for more information, and he also asks Barov what to do with him after getting everything, and he says that just like before, when the interrogation finish he must write information, and after being sentenced the spy must be hanged, and after receiving orders, his student says he is leaving, and Barov thinks that this is already the fourth one. And remember when you told the prince that you have many henchmen on your tail sent by your brothers. He says that the information about cement and flint was definitely leaked, and they don't have it. Enough people to take care of it, but the prince asks why they don't have people enough, saying that every citizen of the border village is his eyes, and he asks to Barov put a decree, and say that there may still be enemies like those who burn in his warehouse of food, and most of them are disguised as relatives of locals or immigrants, and if they notice someone suspicious they must immediately inform the city hall, and after checking, they will receive a prize of 25 silver goals, and he asks Barov to just wait and see, which the prince calls letting the enemy drown in the endless battle against the population, and Barov says that Utesa use people's hearts like demons, but he says that even so he is not afraid of the stone of retaliation of the gods, which is a demon that can give him power. Meanwhile, at the residence of the king of Grey Castle, Timothy says that it has been a month since the order to return to the city was sent, yet where did his brothers return to, and he asks to Bala what he thinks of the situation, and he says that Roland has already sent a response, saying that in letter he said he will consider returning to the city after he is sure his subjects will be saved when the months of the devil are over. Even so in the letter he referred to the king as your highness and not as your majesty or the king. Then Timothy thinks that he is a very ignorant little brother, because if he had referred to him properly as king, he could have spoiled him, but he wonders what good is there in trying to feel better, and in that he says he's going to leave him aside and asks about the fifth sister. Then Bala says she simply disappeared, so he asks what he means by disappeared, and he says that first she promised her messenger, but after a week she disappeared from the Silver City Palace. Bala says that the butler and the two cliques also disappeared with her, and he says that he sent his subordinates to look for them, but they found nothing, and so Timothy becomes very pissed off, sending him to look for them, as he cannot let any royal blood run in the commoner's world. And he also asks about the third sister, Garcia Wimbledon, asking if she still refuses or obeys, and says that because she is so stubborn, he will have to take drastic measures, telling the Prime Minister to inform Duke Joe of the Southern Guard, ordering him to do it, send the troops and force Garcia to give up the clear water ports, and then he must escort the king's city. But then the knight arrives calling Timothy, saying he has just received a message from the south from his sister, saying that Garcia defeated the southern duke 5 days ago, and she currently occupied the city of water, and so Timothy is very surprised, and the guard says that she declared herself queen of the clear waters, and each of the lords responded, and the whole south of Grey Castle declared itself independent, so already in the west of the village, on the banks of the rivers of waters, Red, Carter, and the Iron Axe are pushing the cannon, so he thanks them for. He says that ceremonial cannon is very heavy, and Carter says he asked him to watch it, but he asks who would steal something so heavy, and he says he already said that this is not a cannon, ceremonial, and he says that this is the materialization of all the blood sweat with a deafening sound produced during the caliber drilling and the difficult process of building the structure. Then he says he is a man for men, and questions how Carter doesn't understand, in this lightning, asks if they can start cleaning the gauge, and he tells her to go ahead according to the movements, and at that Carter asks if he didn't sign a witch's contract with that new witch, and he says that she said that as long as she has new inventions to tinker with she will work for free, and he is completely happy because besides food and shelter, he doesn't have to pay her anything, and he soon questions how he could refuse something like that, and with that she returns to the prince speaking that the mop did not remove any residue and asks him to give the next instructions, and in that he asks if everyone understood, saying that the first step is to make sure there is no residue in the caliber. Then he says that later they put gunpowder and project it into the caliber, and says that later he knows that this key is learning how to operate the artillery, and asks everyone to pay close attention, and in that she starts the process, and first puts gunpowder and then projects it, and then everything should be fine, and he asks her to punch the gunpowder bag and finally put the fuse, and with that the preparations are finished, and he asks everyone to take a step back, as he cocks the cannon, and when he fires the shot, that same shot goes through the dummy test, completely tearing the armor that was on it. Then Van Eyre says that the amount of bullets was very scary, and the Iron Axe in turn begins to pray, and the lightning speaks that it was a great show. He says that it seems like it was a success, and it seems like that cannonball traveled about 100 meters after hitting the target, and says that in theory, the range of the 12-pound cannon is more than 1 kilometer, and with that test the results are not bad. And Carter says that this is a very frightening penetrating power, and if it is like that it can even pass through an army. But he tells the prince that even though that weapon is very powerful, she's very heavy too, so if she falls into a hole they won't be able to move her and all. We stop, the caliber needs to be cleaned before the gunpowder and the bullet can be placed, and he says that in addition the gunpowder and the bullet are much heavier than the cannon, and he already calculates that only a cannon needs 5 to 6 people to operate, and in this Roland says he is right, but that's all. It's worth it as long as they have 2 or 3 cannons, the demonic beasts won't stand a chance. But in true he wanted to talk about Doc, and he says that beasts like the turtle will never be able to pass through the wall, and he comments on the weight, saying that he plans to solve this weak point of boats, and Barov has already gone to the village of Willow to buy one, and he says that using the powers Wind's wind manipulation to control the boat, they can transport soldiers and cannons quickly behind Doc's troops, and when the time comes he can be used to surround and annihilate Doc's troops. But then he is surprised a while later when Barov says that they have no money, and Barov says that's it, saying that the price of a boat with 2 masts is between 80 and 100 gold coins, but that's just the cost of building the boat, and he says no need if they add crew, and he talks about rowers, helmsmen, sailors and captains. The total cost is estimated at least 200 gold coins, and he says that at that time the city hall has a total of 315 gold coins, and if they spend a good portion to buy the ship, his troops will not receive salaries next month. Then the prince says that he said no need sailors and helmsmen, but Barov says that the village of Salguero does not have this type of transaction, saying that the crew always comes with a boat, and if he wants to buy a boat then he will hire them, and he says that even though he can buy new boats from port cities, like the setting of the clear waters, the county of the tidal wind, my President Point, those places are very far, this means they would need more money, but in this the prince wonders, because he doesn't build his own boat, so Barov asks if he's looking to build one boat, and asks how he is going to do that, and Barov says that first that boat needs to transport 1 to 2 cannons, plus a crew of approximately 30 people, and the boat will be able to move with the Wendy's wind manipulation pushing the sails forward, and he will sail on the rivers. Then it needs to be stable, reliable and hard to sink, and finally it needs to be easy to operate for the militia to be able to use with little training. Then Roland shouts that it is decided. They are going to build a barge, but Barov says that even if he wants to build it, he asks what he's going to use, and Roland remembers that even though wood is light, it doesn't knows how to build a barge using it, and if he makes a raft, it will break any time. And for an iron barge, even with Anna's help in welding, he will use all the ore of iron that is stored to make weapons, and certainly not enough to make a barge. But then he remembers that they still have a lot of cement left over from building the wall, and then he thinks of building a cement barge, and Barov is surprised, and he says that's correct, they just need to build an outer wooden hull to adjust the iron bars and put cement, and he thinks it is cheap and simple to build and also guildable, so he asks Barov to go quickly and fix it for Carl to build a shipyard temporary on the banks of the Clear Waters River, and he says it doesn't have to be too complicated. A shed is enough. He says it needs to be spacious, with walls, the kind that can be created and torn down quickly, and while he is brainstorming, he decides to try to draw a sketch. And so, already on the coast, Lightning arrives asking the prince what his new invention is joking, and she guesses that it is a giant bathtub, saying that he really is a prince, and he says that even the bathtub is too much, but he says it's not a bathtub, it's a barge, and she is surprised, saying that she has never seen it in that format, and tells him not to try to deceive her, and says that his father, Treveo, is the best explorer in the world, and says that he grew up on a boat. So he asks who this is, saying he's never heard his name, and the girl asks if possible, asking how he never heard a name as famous as Thunder, and Wendy is saying that the person who is Lightning and the prince would never be so friendly with each other. It's been a short time since they arrived, and Rochnell says she's just this young type and optimistic, and it doesn't matter if she's in the cooperative association, or she's in the border village. She always acts as she wants, but when talking about that place, Wendy gets sad, and says she doesn't know if the sisters of the camp are safe or not, and in the mountain range impassive, they begin with regranation, and one of the witches speaks to the mentor, saying that the demonic beast is approaching of Wendy, and in that she asks Leaf, who was carrying her, to get down and go help them. And after the guy is left aside, she starts to mold Rochnell, saying that if it weren't for her plan, she could walk and fight alone, and when she finds the sacred mountain and gathers more witches, she will definitely chop her body into thousands of little pieces, and talk about Wendy. Lightning too, saying that there will be no mercy, nor the doors of the sacred mountain will open up for them, and in that the beasts begin to attack the girls, but against the Team Bullet, they manage to defeat several of them, and in this the guy thinks that this is the power of the witches, and if were they normal, they would have already lost their lives without knowing that it was the demonic beasts. And she says that when she finds the sacred mountain, the church will know that the witches with powers, magicians who are God's favorites, and sometime later Leaf comes back to help you, but the guy says there's no need, because it's getting late, and they're going to take a break there. Then she asks them to pick up stone, clean the floor and make camp, and she also asks for Sheena to go to the sacred mountain insignia of all again, but in that when looking to the side, she ends up noticing something and wondering if that is the sacred mountain, so they all look forward, and they say that that tower is at least 100 times the size of the Zong Tower, and it certainly isn't. It's something made by humans, and the guy tells the witches that that's the city built by the deities, announcing to everyone that they had found the sacred mountain, but in this one of them wonder if that is the same sacred mountain, and the Leaf wonders what it was, asking if there is something wrong, and the other says that the sacred mountain decrees on the roofs. Ancient times was beautiful and majestic with a golden and shiny color, but this is completely different, and she says there's something in the holes, and she can't see it properly, but those things don't are divinity, and in this the guy continues saying that the mountain is right in front of him and sends. They continue forward a little further, for they have found eternity, but in this Leaf tries to talk to her, but realizes that she is already completely crazy and thinks that without seeing her eyes her master will not stop, and so they continue following and Leaf sees Sherry fall into behind, and then the guy yells at her asking if she's going to waste time, saying he doesn't have time to bury Sherry, telling her to leave her there because the earth will take care of the girl, so she says that if she had defeated the demonic beasts at that time, Sherry would not have died. But in this another one says that it is not her fault, and one of the witches also says that they are walking for a long time, but they are still far from the sacred mountain, and it is getting late. There will probably be more demonic beasts, and for the safety of the sisters they must return to the foot of the mountain, and she says she will guide the way. They can get there by midnight. But then the guy asks how they can stop now, since they spent the whole afternoon walking without stopping once, and she tells the witches that this is the deities testing her, and without a strong determination they will never reach the sacred mountain, and in this she asks them keep walking, and when the doors of the sacred mountain appear in front of them they may have peace and rest, but in this one of them asks them to look at the sky, because the sacred mountain disappeared, and the guy wonders how this is possible, saying it must be because of the sky dark, they can't see well, but one of them says there's nothing in front of her, and she goes in, totally screwed up thinking about a city they can never get close to, and an illusion floating in the air, disappearing when the sun sets, and thinks they were deceived, and in that Folha says that what they saw was a mirage, and the guy asks what it is, and she says it was mentioned in the stories of lightning, saying that it is a phenomenon that occurs frequently in navigation, but it is rare on Earth, and says that what they saw is nothing but an illusion. The city must actually be too far away, or not even in front of you, and in that guy asks if it means that she at least less exists, and that it has not disappeared, but Folha says that she cannot say. Then one of them shouts that there is something coming in front of you, and you notice that they are demonic kisses asking what they are like, and she says she doesn't know what it is, when she is quickly hit and falls completely dead, and in that Folha realizes that they are demons, and the guy orders them to face the enemy. But those things don't seem to be from this world, and the first of the girls tries to use her magic, creating a swamp, but the demons leave the dogs behind and jump over it. And she wonders how T-Sid is possible, and asks her sisters to move out of the way, but the first of them is automatically killed, and the two that remain face to face with the demons leave, and the one who created the swamp stays behind, and one of the demons turns against her, and when he was going attack her, she is hit by flames, and one of the girls calls Chino to come out appealing, and she keeps looking back while she is very afraid, and one of the witches is left alone facing that with a crossbow in his hand, but the demon simply kicks it away, and Leaf tries to use his magic to stop him, holding his movements, while the guy uses his snake demonic to poison the demon, and so they put it down asking their sisters run fast, and in that Chino shouts to her when he sees one of the demons arming the spear to the Leaf, and in this it creates a swamp at his feet, throwing him down and making him miss the attack that falls very close to the base of the Leaf, which becomes quite frightened, while the demon that was trapped begins to summon electricity in his hand to attack the girls, and they are all hit, and after frying them like the fly on the electric racket, the demon turns to them, and Leaf wonders how things got this way, and this encounter the demon continues towards Guy and picks her up, and even though she's in his hand she continues to be very upset, cursing the devil, until the snakes bite that tube that was in the demon's mouth, releasing a red snow, and after release that snow, Guy is affected by it, but the demon is also affected, falling to the ground. after performing an act that demonstrates that he was suffocating, and in this Folha realizes that perhaps that be the demon's weak point, so she bends down to move forward, picking up the crossbow and betting everything on her decision. Then she takes aim and hits him for her sisters, and he starts to die, suffocated, while standing in that swamp, and she starts crying a lot after the result of a catastrophic battle. Meanwhile, in the battle hospital of the border village, everyone is around Nana quite apprehensive, and she wonders if she is going to die, but her father says no, and they all agree with it, and Roland says that it's okay, even though it's the first time of her receiving the bite of magical power as a witch. She has been releasing her magical power every day, and she just has to believe him, because she will get through this easily.